Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Platforms such as UA Weapons and JomanyW on Twitter and the Enforcer channel allowed people around the world to follow the war in a depth and a way that had never happened before. Retired General David Petraeus.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 727 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And the Russians are losing yet again. And once again, it's good to see you all.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And we have some pretty big news because the Russian Air Force has been taking exorbitantly high losses over the past 48 hours to an unbelievable degree. One, in fact, that we haven't seen over the course of the entire war since month one. The losses have been incredibly high, and I'm actually going to be taking y'all into that news immediately tonight, because from what we understand, these losses may still be happening as we're talking right now. We have not heard of another Russian aircraft being down, but we have heard about a heightened amount of Russian Air Force activity, which will possibly lead, of course, to an inevitable higher amount of losses for the Russian aviation. But moving on into our first bit of news, we got to see a video today from the Dnipropetrovsk, let me go make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Dnipropetrovsk Gulf, showing an Su-35 just kind of bobbing out there in the water. And according to eyewitnesses, the pilot was not that far away from the aircraft, but he was face down and apparently getting lost in the sauce out there in the sea, suggesting that he did not bail out, and he ended up just washing out of the cockpit once it ended up slamming into the water. But here's the clip.
Those silly Russians. Has anybody not told them the salt water's not drinkable? Like, oh, there was a little helicopter up there above it, too.
Oh, yeah, this is not that far away from the coastline.
And some goons walking down the coastline.
Man, they got those Russian federal goons.
Yeah.
And we can see here the camera looking at the sand, of course the sand being very important, but once again panning back out into the sea, where we are going to see a piece of the Su-35 sticking up above the water. It looks like they didn't even bring in an Mi-8. That looks like an Mi-24, weirdly enough, or, well, actually, it's probably an Mi-35 because the landing gear was not pulled up into the fuselage. Mi-35 have fixed landing gear to cut down on production costs. Funnily enough, it's supposed to be a newer and better version of the Mi-24, but it is kind of worse in almost every metric. But nevertheless, we can see it kind of orbiting over the crash site here, showing us that Su-35 did in fact crash, and as we've heard, the pilot did not survive. Possibly even being taken out.
That's gotta hurt, because they can't afford any more of these aircraft losses like that. They just had the guy who they just knocked off in Spain who stole a helicopter. They're losing aircraft left and right. It's just they can't keep this up, man.
They just can't. They just can't keep it up. And the Su-35 is, of course, one of Russia's more modern and advanced variants of the Su-27 airframe. Probably one of the most expensive as well, because we believe, at least by public numbers, that the unit cost of an Su-35 is around $75 million per aircraft, meaning that $75 million was lost when that aircraft was shot down. We can also see an Mi-17 here landing on the beach, as the Mi-24 is probably still orbiting over the crash site a little bit off at the into the sea. And there's that Mi-24 right there. But our video clip,
and you know he's got to be just looking solely at the plane, like, is it salvageable? Forget the man on the ground, the pilot, forget him. They're not looking for the pilot. They could care less. They're trying to see if that aircraft's ready to be recovered or not.
Nah, man, they looked at the pilot sitting there bobbing in the water. They went, shame. How much can we give for the salvage? It's just like, it's like they do not care about the pilot at all. But that's kind of the crazy thing, is that this isn't a low amount of losses that they've been taking over the past 24 hours. It's actually been incredibly high. Just last week, well, actually, just about 2 days ago, they lost 2 Su-34s and another Su-35, all in a 24-hour span. Again today, they lost another Su-34 and that Su-35 we just saw the footage of a second ago. The losses are mounting heavily for the Russian Air Force over just these past few days. They have lost something like 6 aircraft over the past week from what we've been able to accumulate, 4 Su-34s and 2 Su-35s, just in the span of a week. They say here in 3 days, but from what I understand, it was over the course of an entire week. But those kinds of losses are very high. You're looking at nearly 2 air squadrons knocked out of action by Ukrainian ground fire. And from what we understand, there's not really a lot of Ukrainian Air Force engagement of Russian air targets. It's mostly the ground forces that are engaging these aircraft and shooting them down. And once again, I can't say this enough, an exorbitantly high interception and shoot-down rate. But we also got to see some footage from the Russians up near the Kupiansk area showing one of their Su-34 fighter bombers in action. And this kind of gives you an idea of at least what we're looking at on the Russian side being shot down, and also what kind of aircraft are largely being used in the war, which are these Su-35s. The Su-35, well, the Su-34 actually, is a fighter bomber that is, once again, you guessed it, a variation of the Su-27. The Su-27 is like the Russians' bread and butter of their Air Force. I'll go and show this to y'all, because once y'all see this, y'all will never unsee it. So here's an Su-27. These things were introduced into Soviet service in 1985. The first flight of the Su-27 was in 1977. Overall, it's not a bad-looking plane. In my honest opinion, it's one of the best-looking fourth-generation fighters there is out there, at least as far as the aesthetics go. But of course, like everything Soviet, the computer systems are pretty backwards. They're not as modern and not as complex as Western aircraft, even that were comparable at the time, or even 10 years before the Su-27 ever flew in actual military service. Aircraft like the F-15 were already outpacing this thing as far as computer technology went. But the modern-day Russian Federation took this very late-in Soviet design here and decided it's time for us to really make a lot out of this thing and to just beat it into the ground. So, of course, we can see that they have trainer variants. This is the two-seater Su-27, but I want to show y'all the Su-33 right here, which is the naval version. They have, I think, like 60 of these. All of them, all of the ones that are at sea operate off of the Admiral Kuznetsov, which has not been at sea for years. So in reality, the Su-33s are never actually used as naval fighters. They're pretty much just used as very fancy ground-launched aircraft from normal airfields and air bases like the Russian Air Force. There also are a couple of other versions as well, which I'm going to try and see if Wikipedia has some pictures of these. Of course, there are Ukrainian Su-27s. Those are a mainstay of the Ukrainian Air Force and a beautiful camouflage pattern, by the way. But
Man, that camo is just like something to kill for, I'm telling you. I bet the Russians would kill for a camouflage like that because theirs sucks.
Dude, it really does, man. I'm not even going to lie. Their stuff is just garbage. But here are all of the different variants of the Su-27. Every single one of them. There's actually a lot of them. The Chinese actually like the design so well that they actually have their own license-built variant of it. So you can see that this thing is kind of the bread and butter of either the still remaining communist world or the post-communist former Soviet Republic kind of a world like in Eastern Europe and the Russian Federation. But one of the biggest variants that they have made on the Su-27 is the Su-34. This is the one that we see being used in Ukraine the most. It is a tandem seat, which means that there are two pilots, a pilot and a co-pilot, tactical fighter bomber. These things are pretty unique. They have a lot in common with the Su-33, of course, a naval fighter version of the Su-27, but they also enlarged the fuselage so that way it could fit two pilots. And what's also very interesting about this aircraft is that it's the only Su-27 variant in the world that actually has an onboard toilet. And I'm not even kidding. Like, the aircraft has a built-in lavatory right about back here in this part of the fuselage where the mouse cursor is circling. It's literally like a porta potty, but nevertheless, it's the only one of its kind that has a toilet in the aircraft. Kind of a weird fact.
I bet the Russians use that a hell of a lot more than the Ukrainians when they crap their pants so much because they're getting shot down left and right. Oh, bliat, wait, don't crash yet. I gotta go use the toilet. Please, bliat.
Dude,
don't crash, I'm telling you.
When the RWR alerts are going off in the cockpit, this guy's on the toilet going, quick, I gotta shit out some flares. He's like,
man, he'd be pressing that autopilot faster than the button will even engage. Like, come on, take over. I gotta go to the shitter.
But beyond that, the Su-34, getting past all the jokes, is the mainstay of the Russian Air Force's air power within Ukraine. And the best way I can explain this thing is that it's more suited to the ground role, but hardly, because it still can't really carry a massive amount of ordnance compared to Western aircraft. And let me take y'all down to the stats here, so that way I can actually show y'all what this thing can do as far as the armaments are concerned. So let me see if it actually gives us a raw weight. So let's see. Has 12 hard points on the wing. It has a capacity of around 26,000 to 30,000 pounds of ordnance that it can carry on it. In reality, those numbers are nearly half from what we've ever seen in actual use, but that is... They had to make massive modifications to the Su-27 to actually get something that could carry a little less than most Western aircraft can. But let me show y'all the actual video that the Russians published today of one of these Su-34s in combat service in Ukraine. When you see it has the Fab 500s, which are about 1,000 pounds a pop, with the glide bombs attached. So right now, what you're looking at is probably, realistically, if we could see the entire airplane, about 4,000 pounds of ordnance mounted onto this Su-34. That is a wildly small number. That's less than what the Gripen could carry if it was in Ukrainian service, completely loaded out. This is still like 70 to 60% of what a Gripen could carry.
Oh my. Fabulous.
And look at that crappy weld job on these glide bombs. It's like it's terrible stuff.
Wait a minute, were there fans on the back of those bombs? Like, were they spooled up, or was that my imagination?
Fans? You mean the fans?
I think that's my imagination. It's so blurry on the screen. It looked like there was like moving fans, like in the like back of the bomb or something.
No.
It's just an illusion, though.
Yeah, it was
the lag on my end.
Yeah, it was illusionary for sure. And we can see the inside of the cockpit here. You can see the tandem seat for the Su-34 pilots. But here they go taking off.
Those things are massive. Like, it's really deceiving how large those planes are.
Oh yeah, it is. Now, here's the interesting part. Notice their altitude. It is at least 6,000 feet. And I think this may be what's causing a high amount of casualties for the Russian Air Force lately, is that the Ukrainians have a roving Patriot battery that has been confirmed to just be moving around the front lines of Ukraine. They move it into a new location, they set it up, and these Su-34s are trying to use these glide bombs, and of course the glide bomb needs altitude to operate. So they're sending their Su-34s above treetop level to like 6,000 feet. They're being picked up on Patriot radar, and they're being shot down at exceedingly high rates. I believe this is what's causing the massively high casualties for the Russian Air Force at this point, but just giving you all a little bit of a pointer on that. Notice the altitude. We now see them doing a hard roll, probably after dropping their glide bombs, and we can see that their hard roll was a complete, like, 120-degree bank, so they are going down towards the ground. We can see here, another interesting indicator from this clip, is that it must be understood that these operations of the Su-34s at such an altitude is wildly unsafe. The Patriots are picking them up and probably are able to shoot them down. On top of that, even older Soviet systems at 6,000 feet can easily pick up this Su-34 and fire at it as well. And so as soon as they drop their glide bombs, they are trying to hit the deck as quickly as they can. That's why instead of just taking a 90-degree bank and maintaining altitude, they're taking a 120-degree bank and they're trying to hit the deck and get the hell out of there. And there they go. Yep, they dropped the glide bombs. We can now see that now they're taking a sharp bank downwards. We can actually see the glide bombs on their way. And we can see them even taking some evasive maneuvers as well. Looks like they're trying to do a little shimmy, that's what I call it, but what they're doing is they're trying to energy bleed any incoming SAMs. How you do that in an aircraft is that you do sharp left banks and sharp right banks, because as the missile's in its flight, it's actually having to calculate where the aircraft is going to be in the future if it keeps flying where it is going. So when you pull a hard bank, the missile is pulling an even harder bank to the direction you're turning in to try and intercept. And as it does that, it is greatly increasing the travel time of the missile. It's also lowering its energy, meaning lowering its speed. And through the hope of what's really called in reality cranking, which is what this aircraft is doing, they're able to bleed the missile of its energy and speed, so that way it's a lot easier for this Su-34 to try and evade the incoming missile. But that is only successful if you're way away from the actual launcher. If the launcher, like for a Patriot with a PAC-2 missile, is 70 miles away, there's really no way you're dodging that, because that missile has an effective firing range of about 110 miles. If you're about 110 miles away from that Patriot launcher, there is a chance that cranking will bleed the missile of enough energy and speed that this is a successful kind of an evasive maneuver, but in reality, we really don't know. We can still see, though, that they are showing a lot of indicators that this is a very dangerous mission that they have conducted. They're cranking, and also they're hitting the deck immediately after dropping the glide bombs. We now see the Su-34 returning and landing at the airfield, having dropped roughly about 4,000 pounds of bombs. And of course, the Russians are obviously not going to show a successful mission. We can also see the drag chutes deploying right behind that Su-34 right there at the very end of the clip. But this was one of the exact aircraft that got shot down today. Not this one in film, but the exact kind of model. Another Su-35, like we saw bobbing in the ocean near the Dniprovsk Gulf, was also shot down today as well, making the grand total over the last week 6 Russian aircraft shot down, a massive number. But moving on from all of this news, one thing that we are certainly starting to see is that Patriot air defense battery is starting to rake in the losses for the Ukrainians as far as the Russian Air Force's air activities are concerned. We are also starting to note that apparently the Russians are considering the strategic situation to be somewhat concerning, if not desperate, on the ground, because we're starting to notice a lot more footage of the Russian Air Force conducting bombardments of different areas of the front. And I believe that we actually have some footage, let me make sure, of the Russians dropping more glide bombs near the area of Avdiivka or up in Bakhmut. And let me make sure that we're getting... Oh, yeah, correct. Let me move up here because I got to show you all this. This actually correlates with about the same time that those 2 Russian aircraft were shot down near Kherson and Crimea. We got to see that the Russians were bombarding Chasiv Yar with 500 glide bombs, and confirming the idea that apparently the Russian Air Force is a lot more active now than they were in the past. So here's the clip. This right here is Chasiv Yar, and I'll try and show you all this on Google Maps just to make sure that we are able to geo-confirm the location, because it says right here, this is the Chasiv Yar area. So we're going to move up here to Chasiv Yar. Here you can see the railroad tracks that go through the center of town. You can see the industrial area. Here we can see the railroad tracks that go through the middle of town. I do not see the industrial area in the clip, but we are able to largely confirm that this is the high ground of Chasiv Yar, a few miles west of Bakhmut. And we see here some kind of a drone observing the area of Chasiv Yar, and we see some of the glide bombs hitting their targets right here. And while it is unfortunate to know that Ukrainian positions are being bombarded, it's important information to gather that the Russian Air Force is visibly at a higher activity level than they have been over many previous months of the war. And it is showing that the Russians are willing to take higher risks, especially in the losses of these wildly expensive airframes that are irreplaceable. Russian industry is currently not able to produce these aircraft or their airframes whatsoever. And they're also willing to expend irreplaceable pilots that they can't retrain into new positions because they have a very high fatality rate. Going off of all of this, something is happening on the higher strategic level in the Russian mindset, showing that they need to be able to take these kinds of risks and losses at least for maybe the next few weeks, because the Russian army is in bad straits on the ground. And it does look like our reports from the Avdiivka area are confirming that Russian forces are in pretty bad straits, although they did take the town. I mean, you see here more Fab 500s, clearly Fab 500 glide bombs hitting the center of Chasiv Yar here. And you see the smoke rising from the impacts. And Guitar Dog, these are in fact civilian targets. They are commie blocks, which of course people live in them. From what we understand, Chasiv Yar has not been completely evacuated either, although it is pretty close to the front line, so there is the chance that that is incurring civilian casualties entirely, and once again proof of more Russian war crimes. But nevertheless, everything that we are getting out of all of these clips that we have of the Russian Air Force is that they certainly are starting to be a lot more active recently, which is a little ironic considering that the Russian helicopter pilot that defected to Ukraine and was rewarded about $500,000 cash ended up dead in Spain just yesterday. Matthew actually made a video on that just about 36 hours ago, so if you want to go and get a lot more detail on what happened with that guy, go check out that video because it was a really good one. But beyond that, still, we are seeing that the Russians must be in a tough spot. And they're in a really tough spot in a lot of ways. Apparently there is a little bit more public dissent than expected inside of Russia due to the death of Navalny. We haven't seen any of it become violent yet. We have seen a political office within Moscow for United Russia get burned by a partisan attack, which we have the video footage right here of the partisan lighting the Molotov and then throwing it into the building. And we also saw a couple of other interesting things near the front line, which we're about to get to in a second as well. You see him taking a moment to light up his Molotovs here. getting them nice and toasty, as one should. And there he goes, throwing them at the building.
Damn.
Свободу России. Это мой выбор.
And we can also hear him say Svoboda Rossiya, which means freedom of Russia. So this guy might be affiliated with the Freedom of Russia Legion. But that's the end of the clip right there. But still showing the attacks that some Russian partisans are starting to make that are taking not just an anti-Russian war in Ukraine kind of a message, it's actually taking an anti-Russian government message. United Russia makes up around 70% of the representation of the Russian Federation within their internal government, the Duma. United Russia is specifically Vladimir Putin's pet party. It pretty much just exists to keep him in power. So an attack like this being directed against a United Russia political party office is starting to show that partisan attacks aren't just taking a pro-Ukrainian stance, they're taking an anti-Putin stance specifically in attacking his own political apparatus, which is very interesting to note. And it is coming at a time when we're starting to see that the Russians have apparently completely exhausted their armed forces after taking Avdiivka. We have noticed that over 48 hours, there has been literally no frontline change of any meaningful note inside of Avdiivka. The only area that we've seen change is this one tree line heading to Listochkine, but beyond that, literally nothing has moved an inch over 48 hours. This is a major indicator here, because to give you all an idea what a battle for a city like this would normally look like throughout history, the battle for the city would be the major point where one side would break and either fail to take the city, or the other side would break and then the advancing force would take the city, exploit the capture and also the broken up forces that have now been pushed out of the city, and then continue to rapidly advance forward through the countryside towards their next objective. That did not happen. Over 48 hours now, the Russians have not exploited the capture of the city of Avdiivka, and it is starting to show that there is some kind of a severe depletion of Russian forces that, of course, we predicted here on the channel for months on end, that has led them to not be able to exploit the recent capture of the city of Avdiivka. This is once again showing the idea is confirmed, or at least the notion is confirmed, that while the Russians may have taken the city and are able to claim a tactical victory, they're not able to claim a strategic victory. Russian forces are so heavily depleted from taking the city of Avdiivka, they're not able to exploit the actual capture of the city and try and advance onwards. This is identical to what we saw in Bakhmut. While they took the city of Bakhmut, it of course incurred massive losses for the Russian attackers, and they were not able to exploit the capture of the city beyond its actual, just the simple capture in its own right. And it's showing once again that the Russian army is not able to make any follow-through on any kind of even minor level success that they were able to get throughout the course of the war. And when I say minor level success, you have to remember that while Avdiivka is a somewhat larger city near the front lines, it had a population of approximately 45,000 people. Losing 40,000, well really 50,000 Russian soldiers over the course of 6 months to try and take the city is certainly not a winning battle for them in the big picture. And we're certainly seeing that now, because even the British Ministry of Defense, according to their intelligence, is finding out that the Russians are completely depleted, and of course, like the Battle of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and the Battle of Bakhmut, are requiring a rest and relaxation period, quote unquote, to try and regroup and redraw their forces to try and at least get them to where they can even move out of the area to another offensive theater. But moving on from that and reading the report itself,
Man, it's kind of odd. They're saying here in the British intelligence report that they'll require a period of rest and refit. But the only catch is they've launched offensives pretty much along the entire front line right after Avdiivka fell in pretty much every area, including Bakhmut. And to me, that seems like the Russians kind of got supercharged by their little propaganda victory. But what's stupid about that is they're going to put all these men out here who are still poorly trained, they're still poorly equipped, and think that something's going to suddenly change. And in reality, all they're going to do is even blow their propaganda victory, because they're about to prove, they can't even make any progress even when we throw everything at the Ukrainians. They're making no progress whatsoever, and that's why we see no changes on the map even today.
And I would completely agree with that. And what the British Ministry of Defense said is that within the past week, Russian forces have taken control of Avdiivka as well as the coke plant situated to the north of the town, both of which have been heavily contested since October of 2023 and have been on the front line since 2014. So they've been on the front line for literally 10 years. Ukrainian forces have withdrawn to defensive positions west of Avdiivka, the small villages just to the west. It is likely that Russian forces lack the combat effectiveness to immediately exploit the capture of Avdiivka and will require a period of rest and refit. In coming weeks, Russia will likely seek to gradually expand its territorial control beyond Avdiivka, but they probably will not be able to. Of course, the Russians have lost 50,000 soldiers trying to capture the city. These units that finally capture the city are greatly depleted by both logistics, organization, efficiency, manpower, every single category that these units would need to try and be able to push even further west of Avdiivka have been completely depleted, probably down to rock bottom. And they were very lucky to even take the city because really, the only reason that these units did not eventually falter in about a month and a half and then give up on the Battle of Avdiivka is that the 110th Brigade, of course, managed to collapse, unfortunately, due to some poor oversight from Ukrainian commanders on their end during the battle. That's the only reason why they were able to take the city, and it was very lucky for them at that. So now they're going to be sitting here, and they're going to be doing absolutely nothing for the next few weeks, and even if they are able to manage to do something, it's going to be quite difficult for them. The Russians are going to be moving back into the kind of battle that was the most grueling and deadly for them for that 6 months of the Battle of Avdiivka, fighting through the open fields to the next village. The areas in between these villages don't look that big. In reality, they're probably not. They're about 1 to 2 miles apart as far as the village-to-village jumping goes, but for the Russians, that is a death trap. Their vehicles move at approximately 10 to 15 miles per hour through the fields. Of course, their top speeds are a lot greater than that, but in real life, you can't go 30 miles an hour. You've got to go about 10 miles an hour. And that 1 mile stretch becomes a 5-minute move for a usual Russian armored column. And that means that the Ukrainians in that village that they're attacking have approximately 5 minutes to rain down hell on that attacking column and either completely destroy it or disorganize it to the point it routes off the field due to confusion, loss of morale, and loss of conviction to the offensive. Off of all those things, this is going to be another grueling and deadly offensive for the Russians to even try and take a village like Avdiivka or Berdichi, which are probably going to be the main anchor points of the Ukrainian defensive lines that are now made to the east. Going off of that, I would be entirely honest with y'all. I do not think that the Russians are going to attempt to try an offensive further west of Avdiivka. There isn't really any major offensive objectives that they could take beyond this area. The next largest ones are the towns of Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk, and both of them are nearly 30 miles away. And going at the current rate that Russian offensives are able to move forward, those may as well be physically impossible to attain battlefield goals. We'll probably see the Russians never actually try and reach for those towns because it would take so long to even get to those areas. But moving on from that, there still was a decent amount of footage that has come out today from the Avdiivka area. One of the first clips we got to see was the Ukrainians immediately attacking the Russians inside of Avdiivka with drone forces. And here's the clip. When you see some Russians right down there, they have like, I don't know what the hell that thing is, but it's something near to them.
It's a gator.
Oh, and they're sleeping. And we can see it's a Chinesium gator. Oh my god. Dude, that thing hit a freaking wheelie. Look at that. Just good lord, man.
Man, it's not even on tires or something. It's like levitating. Look at that. It's like a golf cart almost. Man, they're driving around like a golf course, like country club mobile out here in the middle of the battlefield.
Ooh. Oh, dude, I think they're about to get it, because what we just saw passing over the screen was a Ukrainian FPV drone chasing that thing down. Look at that. Oh my god. And where's the mule? The mule couldn't have made it that far. Man, that's not it. That's another one that got blown up in the area. Oh, there it is. And there's the drone following it right there. It's slowed down now, and the mule is still running for it, trying to get the hell out of there. Ooh.
Oh man, that mule didn't take that very well.
Not well
at fire,
all.
The favorite Russian pastime. Damn, man. That was tough.
That was pretty tough, I gotta admit. I gotta admit, that's tough. But moving on from that and into our next clip near Avdiivka, we also got to see a small, like a literal glimmer of humanity from the Russians. Out of the course of the entire war, this is one of the few I've ever seen. And y'all can take that to the bank. I've seen pretty much every single video clip that has ever been put out about the war. This is one of the few times I've ever seen a Russian soldier have humanity for a Ukrainian soldier that ended up being a prisoner. The Russian soldier ended up shaking the hand of the Ukrainian prisoner of war right here. It seemed like a little sign of respect from the Russian. Gotta admit, gotta give credit to the Russian for at least having a bit of humanity. But I'll also tell y'all, this is the only time I've ever seen something like this over the entire war. I also cannot play the song, because the song is from a band called Lyub, which is a Russian band that copyrights everything, and funnily enough, YouTube still respects their copyright. So I can't play the song, but I will show you the Ukrainian prisoner shaking hands with the Russian right here. Or more so, the Russian initiating the handshake. Here's the Ukrainian prisoner, and we see the Russian actually holding out, talking to the guy. And then in a second, he's going to be holding out his hand to shake his hand. And there we can see it right there. And he's continuing to conversate with the Ukrainian prisoner of war. And we now see the Ukrainian prisoners of war being held, and then they'll be taken back, processed, and sent to a prisoner of war camp where unbelievable torture and punishment will await them. We have pretty good proof that pretty much every single Ukrainian soldier that has ever returned has been emaciated and does show signs of severe torture, broken bones that poorly healed, and so on. But beyond that, at least at this single moment, one Russian soldier at least showed some kind of level of professionalism in his soldiery, because it's very rare that we ever see any kind of respect given like that by the Russians to a Ukrainian prisoner of war. So, got to give some respect.
At this point, even the Russians have to like shake hands with the Ukrainians because they're fighting like so hard and so much better and better trained than the Russians. They have to recognize real when they see it, and they know, oh, they definitely fight better than we do, and they have much more training than we have. And even them being like, I think some of the Russians know they're fighting an unjust war, and even they like shake hands with them, knowing how hardened of soldiers they are.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. That's maybe why he shook his hand, because he respected their fight and tenacity. But that also comes at the exact same time as we heard the 110th Brigade confirm that during their hasty withdrawal from the battlefield, they ended up leaving wounded behind inside of Avdiivka because they couldn't be medically evacuated. And then the Russians went and executed all of them on film. And we are not able to show that on air, of course, because it's way too graphic. And on top of that, we don't show things like that here on the show. But nevertheless, you have to remember that while this is a nice little sign of humanity by that one Russian soldier, another Russian unit just a few miles away ended up executing at least 11 Ukrainian wounded that they didn't want to take care of or even move off the battlefield, so they just shot them where they lied. So, take that for what you will. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see some footage from during the Battle of Avdiivka. I'm getting all the battles mixed up now because they all have very similar endings and also very similar ways that they unfolded. But beyond that, we got to see some nighttime footage of the 3rd Assault Brigade fighting within the Avdiivka coke plant. And here's the footage. They're laying down the heat. We got some like Lego City music playing in the background, but beyond that, we can hear the APC continuing to fire as the 3rd Brigade also continues to fire in the direction of Russian forces.
Well then.
I can't even really tell y'all what's going on. It's just raw chaos as far as this firefight goes. The Russians have run into the northern area of Avdiivka. Hey! You can build the Bradley. You can lay down the suppressive gunfire. Dude, that music reminds me of like a Lego City commercial. Like, I'm not kidding, man. Like, if you
really
even
does.
hear it, like, it sounds like it.
На броню иду! Десант броня, давай, уходь, так!
Well, then I guess the battle around the coke plant is heating up a little bit.
Well, it's over, but it was heating up when it was happening. But moving on from that clip and into our next one, we also got to see that one of the rarely mentioned units of Russian forces that are fighting for Ukraine was apparently fighting within Avdiivka. Of course, all of their faces are blurred out, and from what we know, this is pretty much the entirety of that unit, but nevertheless, we did get to see a bit of the Siberian Battalion. The Siberian Battalion is a lot like the Russian Volunteer Corps in the Freedom of Russia Legion, comprised entirely of Russian volunteers. I know some goof is about to say, they're not like the Russian Volunteer Corps, they're Nazis! And, like, listen, that's not what I mean. Don't be stupid. I'm talking about they're Russians, and that's really the whole point. We don't really know what kind of affiliation the Freedom of Russia unit, the Russian Volunteer Corps, or the Siberian Battalion have compared to each other. We just know that these are Russians that are fighting for Ukraine. But beyond that, we can see something pretty interesting. We can see here that this guy is actually equipped with one of the brand new machine guns. I believe that is like the MG5 or something like that. It's an H&K MG5, something like that. Let me go pull it up. The MG.
This one was like a scar with the flat dark earth that's got on the side of it.
Actually, I got it dead on the nail, Matthew. It is an H&K MG5 right there.
Oh man, it actually looked better when he was holding it. Like it looks fake or something like in this picture. Like it's made out of like Lego bits or something.
You know, I'm not gonna lie. It looks a lot like an M249, like with that receiver and everything. Let me go check. Let's see here. Let's see. What was it made? Uses a long stroke gas piston. It's chambered in 7.62. So it's kind of like an M60 in that way. Let's see here. MG4. I mean, hell, that really does look a lot like a freaking M249 right there. I'm not gonna lie. But nevertheless, you can see it's the slightly more modern version of the MG4, or I'd call it an M249. These things have been in service since 2015 to the present day, so they're about 9 years old, which in military terms...
Wait a minute, this thing costs 16,000 euros? Am I seeing that right?
Where are you seeing that?
It says unit costs 16,000 euros?
Oh, dang, yeah.
Is that
Good
for real?
Lord, yeah, apparently.
No way.
That thing is pretty expensive, man. I couldn't justify
That is
the cost.
crazy expensive. Like, even for the military to buy, like, a ton of those, that's expensive as hell.
Let me go pull this up on off screen. MG3 unit cost, because that used to be one of the main machine guns. Oh, wait, hang on. Not now. Is that a car website? Yep, it is. I was about to be like, well, hold up, 20K? I was about to be like, no way. But let's see here. Unit cost for one of these things, they don't have that here. And I think these things have been in production for so long, they probably never will. But, dang, I cannot find... Yeah, I can't find the cost for one of these MG3 machine guns, which is a NATO-fied version of the MG42 is the best way to explain it. But beyond that, we can see that they are equipped with Germany's latest machine gun. If that means anything, the unit cost is pretty expensive. And then everyone else in the unit is equipped with CZ Bren 2s, which are kind of like a cheaper version of the Scar. And from what I've heard, they may actually even be better. But beyond that, it is pretty interesting to see. They actually have some fairly uniform issued weapons. Their squad machine gunner has an MG5. Everyone else has a CZ Bren 2. Their plate carriers look fairly similar from what I can tell. Actually, there are some crotch protectors on some of them, but some other guys do not have the crotch protectors. But beyond that, it is interesting to know that one of the smaller Russian units that is fighting for Ukraine was in the Battle of Avdiivka, because we didn't hear about that until today, according to this post. But beyond that, pretty interesting stuff. Moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see a little clip made by United24 talking about some of the final days and hours leading up to the end of the Battle of Avdiivka. And it was some pretty interesting footage. So here's the clip.
Special Operation Forces are the multi-tool of the Ukrainian army. These units are prepared for literally any task, no matter how dangerous and complex. We are lucky to catch the Omega unit on a mission we can join and survive.
Man, did you hear him rev that thing up before he fired? He went...
Why do you do that? Is there a reason behind it?
I have no idea. Like, I've never heard them do that before.
Man, that's a good old Southern turbo diesel right there. Those are like really popular down here in the South, and they roll coal.
Hold up, Matthew. You meant to say whirlybird?
Yeah, yeah.
The guns are facing Avdiivka. As you know, it's the most difficult area of the front line at the moment. The Russian army took it in the pincers, but are incapable to close the circle around it. Ukrainian forces have launched a huge campaign to defend the city, and massive battles take place every minute.
Avdiivka has been a frontline city for 10 years. Just 15 kilometers away from occupied Donetsk, it has remained a Ukrainian stronghold. However, this winter, Russian forces launched a massive assault on the city with the aim of capturing it by the end of 2023. Although they have not succeeded, the situation remains critical, with the main road to Avdiivka only a few kilometers away from the enemy forces. In fact, our team reported from Avdiivka just a year ago, and you can see that the situation has drastically changed.
Man, they're revving it up each time.
Everything changed.
You'd think they were Southern with them rolling coal for they fire like that. It's like, let them have it, Cletus. Roll some coal and fire the big ass gun.
Man, you know it, man. Yeah. But anyways, Enhancer probably came up with a good theory. He said might be to provide more current to the electrical system. Probably so, because they're revving it up in every clip before the MLRS fires. So it probably is for that exact reason. But with that,
and ending with how massive the attacks are. Back then, they used less aviation and drones.
What kind of tactics do the enemy forces use?
They just wipe out everything. They have always had such a tactic. They just raise everything to the ground so that there is nowhere for us to hold defense, and then they try to move forward somehow.
The troops operate a Partisan, a DIY MLRS unit, or simply put, a mini-grad mounted on a pickup truck. Today's target is one of Avdiivka's flanks, about 10 kilometers away. Usually, Omega moves into Avdiivka for a couple of days and works there with mortar launchers, drones or other equipment. Among all the tasks they undertake, their main goal is to support the infantry, which is struggling with the defense.
Wherever we're needed, we'll be there. Because the line here is quite close, in general, we can work at 360 degrees.
Is it scary going to the city knowing that it may be encircled?
There is always fear, but we realize that we are not the only ones in Avdiivka. So somehow that's more reassuring.
and that's the end of the clip right there, but showing some of the MLRS actions outside of Avdiivka before the city was encircled and taken about a day or two after that video was filmed. But nevertheless, showing a little bit of those final hours and days leading up to the Ukrainian withdrawal of Avdiivka, and still showing that they were continuing to fight with the same kind of determination and strength that they had at the start. And moving on into Berdichi, we also get to see something really cool, speaking of artillery. The brand new Bodanas that were provided to the 47th Magura. These things just look great. Of course, with the brand new Ukrainian, I believe they're a Tatra cab, I believe. I'm not exactly sure. But beyond that, we can see the normal 152mm artillery piece mounted to the back. A really cool SPG, 100%. And absolutely love to see this thing. But nevertheless, we're now going to be moving on from that and on to something that's a little bit more abstract. Something that I was not able to really put down as markers. Of course, with the Russians doing all kinds of wild things, losing about half the Air Force, having political attacks happening inside of Russia, many of y'all know that Alexei Navalny died a couple of days ago, much to the shock of everyone around the world. The Russians are apparently starting to follow through on trying to take out the entire Navalny family and have issued a warrant for Alexei Navalny's brother's arrest, and are trying to also put him in the prison so that way he can get dropsy disease and drop dead on the spot. Of course, many people have been wondering what's going to happen to the whole Navalny lineage. Are they all going to get wiped out? Or are some of them going to survive? Are they going to turn into like the modern day version of the Romanovs? What is going to happen? And Matthew, I know that you have a lot to talk about on this because you actually made a video on this very topic today.
Yes, indeed. So not only was Alexei Navalny, who's the longtime opposition leader in Russia, or he was at least, he was knocked off in Russian state prison. Now we see that Russia has issued an arrest warrant for Navalny's brother Oleg, and now the Russians are conducting a manhunt to find him and lock him up. It's unclear exactly what they're charging him with at the moment. There are some rumors floating around as to what he's being charged with, but we all know the truth. He's simply being hunted down because now he's going to be out for blood against Putin because now Putin just killed his brother. So what are your thoughts on that? It looks like the majority of people believe that Putin is not only targeting the brother Oleg, but he's actually targeting the entire Navalny family, and he's simply starting with the brother. And in my opinion, I think that is not the case. I do believe that is the case, but I will say that the entire Navalny family is in danger right now because Yulia, who is the widow of Navalny, Alexei, she is now stepping up to take his place, which is a perilous thing to do. But I must say, I want to make it clear that I applaud that because even though, it may not end well, she's making a very brave decision to step up and at least make a symbolic gesture that she is going to follow through with her husband's advice and basically step up and take the reins here, which is a good thing, I must say. And it sends a message to Putin that there are some people in Russia that aren't scared of him and are willing to step up and potentially sacrifice their life to make a statement. So I think the entire Navalny family is in deep trouble. And it's not going to be getting better anytime soon. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree the Navalny family is most likely doomed. We haven't seen Prigozhin's family undergo a similar fate. From what we understand, the Prigozhin family is actually still all alive, but Navalny poses a little bit more of a threat because now that he's dead, there's a chance that his family, much like his wife already is, can pick up on him being a martyr, and then he goes down in martyrdom inside of Russia, and there's someone to pick up the torch and kind of carry it along. They also know that unlike Prigozhin's family, which quickly learned that stepping out of line would get them killed, so Prigozhin's son quickly stepped back in line and is now supposedly, at least symbolically, leading the Wagner unit that's now part of the Rosguardia. That probably is not going to happen at all with Navalny's family. They're not going to fall in line because they're clearly showing that that will not be the case right away. So going off of that, I would have to say that the chance, it has a pretty great chance, in my opinion, that they're all probably in a great deal of trouble. And I also saw someone say something about her account has already been blocked off of Twitter, which is kind of ironic because I thought that...
That actually got reversed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She actually got kicked off, and the official statement from Twitter in Musk was that she got kicked off by an automated defense system on Twitter that detects bots and accounts that shouldn't be on Twitter. That was the official statement, and then a manual review happened, and she was reinstated. But a lot of people were getting very upset that maybe it was something politically motivated, but it appears to be a simple mistake, if you believe what Musk is saying.
Well, I find that a little weird because I believe that her following on Twitter before she got removed was pretty high, and usually bots don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, and then they get banned. That'd be a little odd. I feel like that was something that was attempted, and then they reversed it when they saw that it was getting a lot of backlash. But beyond that, it is something interesting to note that she is going to be trying to pick up the reins, and I have a feeling she's going to pick them up fairly quickly because I watched what she had to say today, and it did seem as though she was going pretty hardcore on making sure to make it quite clear that Putin did murder Navalny, or at least gave the orders to have him killed. He wasn't physically in the cell, like strangling him or anything like that, but still had him killed. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least from what we know, and at least from what all of y'all think. But I'll have to be entirely honest with y'all, I do not have a lot of hope in these kind of like offshoot deals. I'm going to have to call them offshoot deals from this point forward, and actually causing real change inside of Russia. Because for 2 years now, we have thought that there would be enough dissent against the Russian central government that there would be some kind of an uprising or at least some severe domestic tumult. And we never really seen that come around the way we thought it would. With the Prigozhin mutiny, that lasted about 24 hours and immediately stopped due to some kind of a fear that we never got to hear about because Prigozhin got killed promptly afterwards. Then, with Navalny getting killed, we're seeing people going to monuments and putting down some flowers and crying and everything about it and saying that Putin is an evil guy, but we're not really seeing anyone acting on the belief that Putin is an evil guy. I mean, partisan attacks are carrying on like they normally have been. I'm not really seeing a massive spike in them. I don't really think there is going to be any kind of a massive backlash from Navalny's death, at least in my opinion. Because if there would have been massive backlash for anyone's death, you would have believed it would have been Prigozhin. Because there was military power behind Prigozhin's uprising. That's very rare. You rarely ever see anything like that, and usually that's the way that change is actually made, is by a armed, violent force uprising against the government. But Navalny's group, if they ever tried to rise up against the government, they're not armed. Most of them are just civilians. Even at that, they make up about 10% of the Russian population according to YouTube subscriber figures, and they're probably considered the more fringe intelligentsia, whatever you want to call it. Intelligentsia side of the Russian Federation. So I'm having a feeling there's probably not going to be a lot of actual action carried through from that end. Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to have to be something once again that's spearheaded by either a rogue group like Prigozhin's group, but they follow through on what they were doing, or it's going to have to be something that rises up from inside of the Russian Federation's government as it stands currently. Because sadly, I think the Russian government is such a repressive force inside of their own country that public dissent and uprisings are pretty tough to pull off unless if almost the entire public is on their side. And we haven't seen that yet, at least in my opinion. But with that, I hope that does kind of address the overall situation the best we can. And moving on from that, we have some interesting comments to address in the form of super chats. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the first very interesting super chat we got is from Kyle Leeson, who's a longtime channel legend, and he throws in a $33 donation. And huge shout out to you for that, Kyle. And while I'm reading off your super chat, I just took out another bot. Big old congratulations for bot be gone. But Kyle says, can we get a moment of silence for those that could not withdraw from Avdiivka?
And I thank you for the support, Kyle Leeson. And yes, we could have a moment of silence. I'm going to make it more towards the end of the stream because I want to make sure that we keep the news going. There's still a lot of Ukrainian soldiers. There's hundreds of thousands of them that are still fighting and dying right now to defend their great nation. I want to make sure that we get to all their stories tonight as well. But we certainly will have a moment of silence. I largely am against moments of silence in the middle of wartime because it makes the tone somber and it kind of, not to put it in a crass way, but it kind of kills the mood. There is a war that is still going on right now, and there are tens of millions of Ukrainians that are still alive and counting on hundreds of thousands of soldiers, almost 1 million of them at the moment, that are continuing to fight and die inside of Ukraine to try and defend their country. I always believe that moments of silence should be very rare and right at the end of the war. We've actually had an idea here on this channel that when the war ends, we're of course going to celebrate the end of the war, the signing of whatever peace treaty it will be and whatever conditions will be in it, and then we'll have a moment of silence not just for the Ukrainian soldiers that didn't make it out of Avdiivka, but the Ukrainian soldiers that didn't make it out of many battles and didn't make it to return home. There are a lot of them that have currently died so far. From what we understand, there's probably around 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers, maybe even on the higher end levels, 120,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers that have died over 2 years. It is actually an incredibly high amount. You don't even see a lot of countries, except for the major ones, having casualty numbers like that during the course of the Second World War. And I want to make sure that we can make a very profound and singular moment for the loss of every single one of them, instead of just 20 or 30 of them at a time. Because while it's sad that 20 or 30 of them, of the wounded, ended up getting killed in Avdiivka, and a decent amount of them also ended up dying during the withdrawal because they actually ended up being a bit of a high casualty event, there isn't really anything that differentiates their loss and their sacrifice from the other 120,000 Ukrainian soldiers that have also died over the 2 years of war that's been going on. There were a lot of brave Ukrainians that ended up dying in Mariupol, and a lot of brave Ukrainians that ended up dying in Bakhmut, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk, and many of them that also ended up dying in the incredible counteroffensives like the Balaklia and Kherson counteroffensives that were pulled off as well. And I don't really want to differentiate each and every one of them. I want them all to be remembered as a unified loss, because while each battle is different and they occur in different places at different times, all their deaths equal to the same thing. They were deaths defending Ukraine and the Western Sphere, and I want to make sure that we have a singular and quite profound moment of silence for every single Ukrainian soldier that ended up dying and passing due to their defense and fight for freedom. But nevertheless, I will make sure that we have a moment of silence more towards the end of the stream tonight. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Kyle Leeson. I hope that does address that well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running and being an old guard of the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who throws in a very generous $20 donation as well. Hey! And thank you very much, Sarge, as always, for that support. And he says, the murder of Navalny is causing chaos in my home, and the wife is crying. The family feels like all hope lies solely with Ukraine and Zelenskyy, and we admire the Navalny family, but are not optimistic, and Alexei was the last hope for Russia. And real quick, before the Enforcer answers that one, I gotta say that Navalny, in my opinion, was basically the political version of Prigozhin. Prigozhin was the military version of a potential coup in Russia, and Navalny had the potential to conduct a political one. And in my opinion, now Putin has knocked off both of those aspects. He's knocked off Prigozhin first, which was the most immediate threat because he was literally on the way to Moscow with the military force to overthrow Putin. He gave up and was killed. And now Navalny, he was already in prison for months and months and months, and now he's been knocked off in prison. So now both the political and military threat has been eliminated to Putin's power, which to me, I will agree with your sentiment, kind of feels like hope is slowly slipping away that Putin is going to be overthrown domestically. There's still hope, but we really need to find out who the next big opposition leader is going to be. It may be Yulia, but it's kind of hard to tell at the moment. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the death of Navalny is a pretty tough thing to work with, because on an actual diplomatic level, it's going to be very hard to have a destabilizing force in Russia without Navalny. I want to make it clear, though, that Navalny wasn't like a savior of Russia. He actually was largely in support of the Russian annexation of Crimea and also the ongoing war in Ukraine. He really didn't have anything negative to say about either of those things. It more so was the fact that he was directly targeting the central Russian government, which is Vladimir Putin and United Russia, and trying to tear them down and make a power vacuum that he possibly would rise up through, or someone else would rise up through that might be even more suitable to Western interests or be more friendly to Western interests. That was kind of the hope that everyone was having with Navalny, and I really don't want Navalny to be painted like a great guy, because Navalny was a lot better than your average Russian, yes, in the government, no doubt, but at the same time, he was a lot like Prigozhin. While on the surface seeming like he could be a force for change and maybe even a force for good, he still was a questionable person and didn't really have a lot good going for him. But I would have to agree.
I'd agree with that too. I would agree with that. Navalny was a means to an end, just a way to destabilize the Russian government and potentially overthrow Putin, or at least cause enough chaos to oust him in some way. But, you know, Prigozhin was the same thing. Prigozhin was definitely not a good guy whatsoever either, but he was also a means to an end to potentially get rid of Putin, because at this point, I'm not sure how much worse a new leader could be rather than Putin. Putin's pretty much at rock bottom right now. There's obviously a couple more depraved steps you could take to get, to the level of Hitler. He's basically there now, but there's a few extra steps he could take to be even more dastardly. But, at this point, we'd be better off with anybody else rather than Putin, in my opinion.
And I would agree. But once again, and also I saw Kolchak say, he wasn't a good person, but it doesn't deserve that he was jailed and killed. And I would agree with that. But still, I don't, a lot of people in the West are kind of making Navalny out to be like a hero, like he was a perfect guy. And I kind of want to, kind of warn against that a little bit, because he wasn't a great guy. I mean, like, he was a good guy as far as Russia goes, but he wasn't, like, a great guy overall, because even if he had ended up being elected president of Russia somehow before this war happened, the war was probably going to happen anyways. It would have just been under Navalny. And for that reason, that he didn't really have a lot to say. In fact, he had nothing to say against the war and backed it up. I don't really want to view him as like this protagonist of the Russian Federation, because he kind of would have been the same as Putin, just a different government and hopefully less corruption in Russia. But even then, I'm kind of doubting it, because the Russian history of how their government's founded and how it kind of forms and what the Russian public thinks is a good government kind of tends to lend itself to being an authoritative regime. Even if the Russian public wishes it was different, they usually don't respect a actual lenient democratic government. That's why they've never really survived in Russia too well. Boris Yeltsin is looked at as a fool and a clown because he wasn't that heavy-handed, although he did start getting heavy-handed after about 1994. And then afterwards, he ended up falling ill with health, and then the leadership was given over to Putin. But then Gorbachev, which is really the only example I can think of in all of Russian history where there was an actual lenient, kind of democratic-ish leader through his policies of glasnost and perestroika. He ended up being looked at as a clown and an idiot by the Russian public because he was too lenient on him. Glasnost and perestroika, both of those policies, allowed the Soviet public to speak out against the government if they wanted to without the fear of reprisal or backlash. And they ended up looking at him like he was an idiot. They were like, what do you mean this guy's not going to put us in prison if we speak out against the government? This guy's weak. And even the modern Russian Federation, and a lot of people even in the post-Soviet republics, look at Gorbachev as a weak, incompetent, and stupid leader for those reasons. And it blows me away, and it really does kind of prove and show that the Russian government is most likely always going to lean towards being an authoritative regime, just because of their history. And I would go through their history in great length, but I would end up turning into Vladimir Putin and explaining like 30 minutes straight of Russian history to explain why their government looks the way it does, and why it almost always does turn into an authoritative regime. And I'll save you all that history lesson. I might make that like a special video on its own one day and explain why the Russian government is like that, and why it probably will never change. But beyond that, I will have to say that at least for the moment, for real change to ever actually happen in Russia, it's all hope is kind of lost at the moment. I can't think of a real candidate, LSA Sergeant Pigman, that could take up the place of Alexei Navalny to be a destabilizing factor in Russia that could bring about political change. I don't think there will be one. At least for
Could be Medvedev. Like he could cause a lot of chaos.
Yeah, but he really likes Putin. He's in a good power arrangement with Putin, so I don't really think he would be a good candidate. And then all the people in the armed forces, they're all incompetent and yes men, and there isn't really a good candidate there either. I don't know.
Medvedev kind of strikes me as a type of guy who may stay low profile for now and occasionally make some bold statements against the West. But he seems like the type that might be secretly kind of like sitting back, waiting for a weak moment that Putin has, and he might try to attempt something. That's just a hunch. I really have nothing to go on to base that on. But his personality doesn't seem like the type to sit back indefinitely and just sort of wait.
And that's true. I mean, like, Medvedev does seem a little bit opportunistic, but still at the same time, there are instances in Russian history where opportunistic leaders ended up taking advantage of good situations, but they usually did that during very key times. Like, for example, Khrushchev is probably the best example of that. Do you know the story of Khrushchev, Matthew?
Vaguely. Very, very vaguely.
So he was an interior minister during the time of Stalin, and he played his cards really well because Khrushchev was always eyeing being the premier of the Soviet Union. But he knew that he could never do it while Stalin was alive, because Stalin would just have the guy straight up killed, and Beria would make sure to follow it through, because of course the Russian government is more so explained better as an oligarchy with a very strong central oligarch, which is Putin, or back in the day it would have been Stalin, but there still is a little ring of very close people to this single dictator that makes up a small oligarchy, and nowadays that's the Russian armed forces and, of course, the business oligarchs of the Russian Federation, which make up Putin's small clique. But back in the day, during Stalin's time, it was the Central Committee that ended up making Stalin's little clique. And this clique all was ready to vie for power as soon as Stalin died. And when he died in 1953, which came as a shock to everyone because it was a stroke and he literally just dropped dead, it was a really big shock. And Khrushchev immediately started to put a plan into action to become the premier of the Russian Federation, well, the Soviet Union. And he ended up succeeding not that long after. He ended up having his political opponents killed or either whisked away to far away places. He ended up demoting people like Molotov, which were very influential during Stalin's time. And he had Laurent Beria executed for crimes against the Soviet people, which were made up and trumped up charges, just so that we could have him thrown out of the way because he was a true threat to power. But the whole catalyst that happened there was that Stalin died. He didn't do it while Stalin was alive. Everyone was just way too scared of him. And I think the Russian government today might think that about Putin. They're way too scared to deal with him because he's got enough yes men that if even a single one of them stands up, the other yes men are probably going to maul that guy alive and make sure that he's not able to actually pose a threat. And then with Khrushchev, the way that Khrushchev was thrown out of power was a pretty sly way. Khrushchev left Moscow, I believe it was like in 1964 or 1965. It was somewhere in the mid-60s. But he left Moscow to go on a retreat, a fishing retreat, for 2 weeks. And once he left, because like the Soviet central government at the time, you pretty much had to be in Moscow to keep control of things. And if you ever left, your power was actually in serious threat of being lost. The Central Committee gathered around while he was gone and said, you know what, while he's gone and not in Moscow where he can actually command anyone to do anything, let's just throw him out of power and put Brezhnev in. And everyone went, yeah, that's a great idea. So they threw Khrushchev out and then they put Brezhnev in. And then that's how Brezhnev got put in power, is that he pretty much pulled a play while Khrushchev was away. So going off of both of those precedents, while Medvedev may be a guy who's cunning and wants to be in power in Russia, I don't think it's going to happen unless if Putin traveled abroad, which if you notice, Matt, that's an interesting thing adding into that. Putin has rarely ever traveled abroad during this entire war. He always sends Lavrov or some other representative of the Russian government. He rarely ever leaves the nation of Russia or Moscow in particular during the entire war. And it may be for a Khrushchev-like reason.
You think so? I personally just think he doesn't want to leave because he's worried simply about getting assassinated, but is that the reason you're saying?
I think it may be the case. I think that may be why he's not leaving, is because he knows there might be some really opportunistic, power-hungry people like Medvedev who just gather together all of the oligarchs in the clique and goes, listen, he's gone. We can get a better situation out of this. Put me in charge. We'll throw him out while he's gone. They could try and do something like that.
Now, on that front, I would say probably not. I think Putin's simply scared to leave the country because he's worried that if he leaves, that gives somebody an opportune time while he's in transit to try to either strike him, shoot him, or poison him with something, run up and smear something on him. I know he's got security, but there's always accidents that happen all over the place, as y'all see with secret securities all around the world. But no, I personally don't think if Putin leaves, I don't think anybody back home is going to try anything. I mean, like Medvedev might be the type of opportunist that if Putin were to suddenly become ill and incapacitated, that would be when someone like him jumps in and tries to take the whole government over, is when something like that happens.
Maybe so. But with that, I hope we addressed that super chat well, LSA Sergeant Figment. You led to a very deep discussion about the Russian government, but nevertheless, I hate to hear the whole family's in shambles, LSA Sergeant Figment. I hope things get better over there, and maybe there will be a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. Although, who knows? It's a weird situation in Russia right now, and it doesn't really look like there is a threat at all to Putin's power with the death of Navalny. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're moving right back into the news.
All right, and this one goes to Captain Kirk. He's not on the Enterprise today. He's here on a stream, and he does not leave a comment, but he does throw in a very generous $20 donation. And thank you very much, Captain Kirk, and we appreciate it very much. And please don't send any more red shirts out to get killed needlessly. That's not necessary. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Captain Koik, the great captain of the Federation. Ah, yes. The Federation, not with my mind sifter. You know what I'm talking about, Matthew. That's stupid.
Jim.
Damn it, Jim. But anyways, Thank you so much once again for the support, Captain Kirk. You didn't throw in a comment, but your support does mean a lot. Support helps this channel to keep on running. It helps the thing to keep on rolling. If it wasn't for people who threw in support in the form of super chats or supported us on Patreon, this channel would not be possible. We run an ad-free, sponsor-free show, so there is no magic element in the background that makes this thing possible. It is entirely the Lee Spring Army and their generosity. And speaking of generosity, the Lee Spring Army was able to raise $4.5 thousand for Razom for Ukraine this last Sunday, which is absolutely incredible. It's $1.5 thousand over the actual fundraiser goal, and I gotta say, that is incredible to know the Lee Spring Army, even this far into the war, still continues to support the fundraisers. And I got to thank the folks who also throw in super chats to the channel, like you, Captain Kirk, and everyone else who has tonight, because a very, very small amount of people throw in super chats to the channel versus the amount of people who throw in support to the fundraisers. And of course, the support to the fundraisers helps to manage to save lives in Ukraine. But the support to the channel makes it possible for this channel to continue to exist 6 days a week, every single month, every single year until the war ends. And also, it helps us to be able to make it around on Sundays where we can run the fundraisers. So I get to thank everyone once again, because while the super chat support does go directly to the channel, it does help to make everything else possible, including the fundraisers. And so thank you so much once again, Captain Kirk, and thank you to everyone so far who has supported the channel tonight. We will be getting to everyone else. It just will be a little bit later, so hang tight. And also, if you do want a question answered and you want to support the channel and help it to keep running, super chats are the way to do that. We still answer live chats, though. It is completely free to watch this channel. You don't have to watch an ad or a sponsor to watch these live streams, and you can still throw in a live chat and have it answered. It's just that throwing in super chat helps the channel to keep running, and also it prioritizes your question to be first in the list, because of course, you know, you're helping the channel to keep on running, so we want to make sure to get to folks who are helping this thing to keep rolling. But with that, we are now moving on to the Ukraine air defense news, which came out that they did pretty well last night. They were able to shoot down almost all of the incoming Shaheds, 23 of them overnight, a fairly good number. But moving on from that and into our location unknowns, we also have a fairly interesting deal of clips over here. Starting off with our first one, where we got to see another one of those Russian underground cities. When you see them showing it off, it looks like garbage, but it still is a pretty expansive underground layer. We see them continuing to show off the compound here, showing off some tables. Whole gym. They have a whole gym with weights.
Do you even lift, bro?
Bro, you know the Russians ain't lifting. They're drunk as hell all the time.
Hey, that guy right there is definitely not lifting. I'll tell you what, he needs to.
Dude, he's lifting that go off the table. That's what he's doing.
He's just simply sitting in the chair and standing up. That's enough for the day.
Dude, this thing looks like it's made out of pallets, man. It does not look good.
Thought I heard a rat in the background. That would be about right. Man, I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Man, I tried to sound like a rat. But anyways, that's the end of the clip
I don't know
right
if that
there.
sound like a rat.
Man, I don't know either, man. Hell, man. I'm starving to death over here. But with that, that's the end of the clip of this underground city. And once again, showing some interesting works of the Russians. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the inside of a Bradley. Check this out. See him rolling on along, singing a song. But also, by the way, another interesting note, this isn't the turret. This is actually the crew, the infantry compartment at the back of the APC. Because what you're seeing in front, right there, that's actually the turret basket right there for the two-man turret. Hear the Bradley kind of rolling around a little slow like. And we see this guy is watching their progress up front on screen. Pretty cool. I like it. But moving on from that and into our next bit of location unknown news, we also got to see a Czech provided cube. Pretty cool. Anyways,
I
moving
like
on.
that goop.
Moving on from that, we got to see some Ukrainian soldiers eating and drinking by the fire. Eating those MREs and drinking that hot coffee. Because everyone knows that you got to have the best Wilkins coffee. Matthew, do you like Wilkins coffee?
I love coffee in general, man. I don't care which place it comes from. I'll take it.
Man, you must have not heard about the Wilkins coffee commercial. Well, you see this Ukrainian soldier here. We can see Ukrainian soldiers here eating some food, sitting by the fire, having a good time, a jolly good time. Eating those.
And they got some of that orange drink. I don't know what it's called, but it's orange drink.
They got that drink in their cup. Oh, man. It cracks me up, man. Cracks me, it really does. And look at that. There's the coffee. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But I gotta say, those Ukrainians are eating well. Moving on from that, we also got to see some M777s undergoing repairs inside of Ukraine. This is an M777 that's being repaired somewhere in an unknown location in Ukraine, but starting to show that the Ukrainians are finding a way to try and make sure that these M777s remain operational. And hopefully they do, because those M777s, they do schmack. But moving on from that, and into our next little bit of news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And
oh, goodness, man! Forget the Bobcats today. The 2 planes take the cake. I'm telling you what.
Oh my lord! 6 Bobcat skid steers, but 2 aircraft as well. Also, on top of that, 1,230 Russian soldiers ended up getting wiped out over the past 24 hours. Pretty high number. Along with 36 armored personnel carriers, 38 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 40 artillery systems, 61 drones, 2 MLRSs, 3 cruise missiles, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 2 planes, and 6 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, it was a really good day. I mean, you can't really fight these numbers. I mean, these are some really good numbers right here, and showing that things are going really good. And I gotta say, happy to see it, love to see it, and it lets us know that the Russians are once again having a really tough time fighting this war. But moving on from that, and out of that news, and towards our northeastern front, we got to see a couple of clips up here. Starting off near Vilshana, we got to see the Ukrainians trying to pull one of their buhankas out of the rut. And here's the clip. But anyways, we can see the little buhanka here, and we see the Ukrainians trying to yank this thing out. We see Santa right here. And then we see a little dachshund.
Hey, look at him. Where'd he come from?
Dude, that dog was just chilling. He got that dog.
That dog did not belong there. I'm telling you, that was like the most out of place thing ever. Let's see that one more time.
Man, let's see it again, man. Let's see it again. Look at this. Here's Santa. And then there's the little baby dachshund.
Man, that fella does not belong there. How did he get out there on that battlefield?
Dude, that thing just chilling, man. It's just chilling. It's just grilling. But anyways, moving on from that and down near Svatove, we also got to see the Russians hitting, well, actually the Ukrainians hitting some Russian positions. Excuse me. Watch them get blasted. Not with rock, but with high explosive. Here it comes. Ooh, they got that one. And here it comes again. Ooh, they got that one too. And here it comes another time. Ooh, they got him. Oh, look, there's a crowd of Russians right there. And here's another crowd of Russians right here. And they're about to get lost too. And here comes another one. This is just a singular Russian, but screw him anyways. And that's the end of the clip. But hey, Russia's got a Russian, Ukraine's got a Ukraine. And Ukrainian blow away Russians. It's a tried and true statement. Works out every time. But moving on from that and down into the Bakhmut area, we also got to see near Avdiivka a Ukrainian soldier standing in one of the destroyed houses of the town. I've never heard that song before, but of course it's probably copyrighted. We see him showing off the ruins of this house. And we see him just showing the debris and the ruins. And that's the end of the clip, but giving you a little bit of a look at what the area around Avdiivka looks like. But moving on from that and towards Klishkivka, we also get to see a couple of Ukrainian T-64 BVs on the move. And And here they are, rolling around. Look at them go.
You know, that Chad music makes it all the more better. If you play this music, you're more alpha male.
Man,
What color is your Bugatti?
I'm gonna make it pop like that.
But anyways, we see the next T-64 BV coming up. Remember, folks, if you have to tell people you're Chad, you're not Chad. Chad fact of the day. But anyways, I see in the clip right there, gotta say, love to see it. But moving on from that and out of the Bakhmut area and down, actually, we're gonna go behind the lines for a second, but so we got something funny to tell y'all. So the Russians have training camps inside of the Donbass because they try to train the soldiers after they get to the front lines how to fight the war, which is a little too late, but they still give it a shot. Apparently, in the process of doing that lately, they ended up causing some high casualties. They called a formation in the morning, and 2 companies fell into formation, which is about 200 guys out there, and a HIMARS literally landed right on top of their heads and wiped out 2 whole companies on this training ground. So here's the aftermath, of course not showing, well, at least I hope not showing the corpses, but here's this guy who went and cowered in the tree line, and then starts filming and telling us that all 2 companies were wiped out.
Пидоры, сука. Вон, сука, достроили пидорасы, блядь. В чистом поле, нахуй. Ебаные, нахуй. Командиры. Всю роту расхуярили. Походу 4-я. Так она и 6-я там, ебаный в рот. Там пизда народу. Просто пиздец. 2 роты, нахуй. Там кто пошел?
I'm told there are spicy bits in this.
Там пизда вообще.
Oh, there's spicy bits?
Вот
That's what I'm
4-я
told.
рота. Полностью лежит.
Oh, I'm sure we can block them out.
6-я рота, блядь. Полностью.
Those aren't folks, that's just luggage on the ground, y'all.
И нас, ну, прикинь, где мы стояли, короче, нахуй. Вон, въебало. Бля, прикинь, где... В натуре, где мы стояли. Вон дымит где. Пиздец.
Seem continuing to show.
Нормально, да? А? Я знаю, пчела.
And that's the end of the clip. Didn't really get to see much more beyond that, but I have a feeling that those 2 companies are a little depleted on manpower. But that was a cheap joke. But anyways, moving on from that and into Novosibirsk, we also got to see a destroyed MTLB. And I gotta be honest with y'all tonight, I'm so sorry that it sounds like my delivery's dry. My throat's actually dry as hell right now. It actually hurts to talk, and I'm starving to death. But we can see a destroyed MTLB right here. Pretty nice to see. Moving on from that, and past the Avdiivka area, because we covered all those clips earlier on in the stream, it's time for us to move down to the area of Yasny and Berezove, because we got to see the destruction of a Russian warehouse with a Ukrainian drone, and it was all pretty crafty. Check it out. Here it is. There's the warehouse. Here comes the drone. Ooh, flying right inside. Because they don't play games. We see it hovering around, trying to find its target. We see it's a BMPT Terminator inside the warehouse. They're going to try and make their way over to it. And there they go.
Oh.
And now we see them going for the T-72 in the warehouse. Ooh! And they got it too. And then they're going for the BMP-3. Oh! They got it too. And we see a T-72. Ooh! And they got that one. And now the whole warehouse is on fire. It's all burning down. I don't even know if a drone can make it in there. And that's a full-on structure fire with vehicles inside. Pretty tough.
It's a shed fire. It's almost as bad as a dumpster fire. Also, what good is a shed if the whole bottom of the shed's open like that?
Yeah, I know. Like, what's the point? But we can see this drone making it in, battling the smoke to go battle some Russians. Because I'll tell you something, the Russians can't battle well, but one thing they are going to be getting are these hands. And we can see the Ukrainians are giving them out free of charge.
It'd be a shame if they even charged them for it while they were smacking them.
Man, I'm telling you what, like, the only thing that's charged around here are the Panera Bread charged lemonades, and those things are as lethal as the Ukrainians. But we can see here, they are continuing to hit the Russian forces with some great fervor and integrity. I'm hitting all those buzzwords tonight, y'all. Y'all ought to be prepared.
Well, that's burning late into the night.
Man, romantic. It's late into the night.
Yeah.
Romantic. I wonder if
Russian
that...
chain smoker doesn't even just smoke a pack today. They can just go up and breathe a little of the air, and they'll be good for the day. You know, get that little nicotine hit.
Get some of that PCB into their lungs. You know, some of that deliciousness. It's magically delicious. But
Some of that metal, some of that iron, all that good stuff.
Dude, they're going to be making East Palestine, Ohio look like kids' work. But anyways, moving on from that into Volodar, we also got to see a low-flying Mi-8. I don't know what's with the music choices these days, but this thing is pretty much flying with the front wheel touching the ground. Pretty cool to see, and that takes some pilotship right there. Some real pilotship if I've ever seen it. And this is one of the best damn pilots in the galaxy right here. But anyways, moving on from that, nice to see. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and a little bit further down the lines into Avdiivka, where we got to see some bomblets getting dropped on Russians' heads. If it loads. If it loads. If it loads, oh, and we got it. There we have it, right here. There we go. And now here's the clip. And that music right there is from High Fleet, which is a game you can get on Steam. We see them continuing to drop bomblets onto these wandering Russians, these pesky Ruski, and look at them. Ooh, just getting peppered up like a nice breakfast here in the South. Did you all know that in Britain you get baked beans for breakfast? Like, a lot of people crap on that, but honestly, I think that's a pretty hearty breakfast option. Baked beans in the morning. And, like, you get, like, the eggs and, like, you know, the toast, and then you get, like, a different kind of a bacon. But overall, I'm not going to lie, while we're watching this clip, and I'm starving to death, I'll tell y'all, I honestly think British breakfasts are pretty good. Pretty solid. I mean,
I also eat blood pie for breakfast, too, so I'm not sure if that's saying much.
Dude, I was talking about how good British breakfast is, and you're like, yeah, and their breakfast sucks. I'm like, what the hell? But
The blood pie is a little bit too much for me. That kind of turned me off of British breakfast a little bit.
You mean black pudding? Not blood pie?
Yeah, that's too much.
Dude, blood
It's
pie
blood
sounds
pie,
like...
basically.
Dude, blood pie sounds like a cult sacrifice routine. We're gonna have a blood pie for the blood guys. Something like that. It's like, man, what?
I said, man.
Man, oh man, I'm telling you, oh man. But anyways, moving on from that and down the front lines and into the area of Robotny, we did get to see some Russians getting hit down here as well. And Butcher777, thank you for correcting that. It's not a blood pie. It's a black pudding. Watch these Russians turn into a blood pie right here. Man, look at that, man. They are turning them into blood pies. Like, it's just, man. I got
the British come along saying, "Aye, bruv, this looks like a very good breakfast. Put this on the plate."
Okay, but I'm not gonna lie. Whoever the hell came up with the idea that eating a chocolate bar for breakfast is good, I don't know what they were thinking. I'm looking at the French. Like, the French eat chocolate bars for breakfast, from what I've heard. It's also a Belgian thing as well, and I don't get that because, like, yeah, I get it. You know, chocolate has caffeine in it, but, you know, it's not a good breakfast. I mean, it's just chocolate. And, you know, chocolate's all right. It's not that great. But anyways.
Hey, bruv, lay off the chocolate bar for breakfast and lay on the blood pie. I mean, pile it on the plate.
Oh, Governor, this blood pie looking smacking. Man, I'm telling you what.
That blood quicker.
That blood pie is minging, Governor. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians capture 4 Russian soldiers. By the way, not crapping on the Brits. Love the Brits. And by the way, we're like 90% British. So
yeah,
I
I'm
can't,
actually British.
Yeah, like Matthew and me are both 90% British. 8% Swedish, and 2% Norwegian as far as the ancestral thing goes. So we really can't crap on the British because we're pretty much British. So,
We
anyways,
sounded so convincing when we said that too. We said, "Yeah, I'm actually British." I
I'm-
sounded like it was Southern possible.
man. But you know one thing that's annoying, man, are the folks here in America that are like 1% Cherokee, and then they're like, "I'm Native American." I'm like, "No, you're not." Like it's like you're whatever the major percentage of your DNA is. So for us, like, being,
try to be Pocahontas. You actually have to be that. You know.
it's weird to me how people will cherry pick their ancestry. Like, they'll be like, like 60% British, 20% Slavic, and then they'll be like, whatever the rest of it, it's just an amalgamation of everything. And then they'll go, you know what? While I'm majority British or Irish, I'm going to go and pick Russia and act like that's my ancestry. It's like, no, it's not. You're really like Irish or something. But anyways, here's the clip of these 4 Russians surrendering with some epic dubstep. And here they come out of the bunker.
And here we see the Ukrainians are going to give them some very quick dance lessons real quick. A dance.
And here they go. Actually, it looks like they got 5 Russian prisoners. Yeah, they got a wounded one. So 5 of them.
Wow, it looks like an old Fallout hut or something over there. It was like a wasteland galore.
Man, wasteland galore. I like that. It's good advertising. But anyways, moving on from Rabone, which had some minor action happening in it today, it is time for us to make it up to Kyiv for the speech from Zelenskyy. And I'm not going to lie, y'all. I'm praying that this is 6 minutes long, because if I don't get some food in me, I'm dropping dead. So if y'all don't hear back from me once the speech, oh god, it's only 2 minutes long. Why? I can't even get up. Like, I'm gonna have to just sit here. So sorry, everyone. Wait, hang on. There's another one down here. Hold up, we're gonna cherry pick. Okay, this one is 6 minutes long. It's from today, so we're going with this one. I'm sorry, everyone. We're going with this one. But let me get the subtitles here, and oh, it's in English. Hey, what luck?
Hey.
But anyways, here is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and I'll be right back.
Wilson, dear members of the Helsinki Commission, and all the defenders of justice. First of all, I want to thank the Commission and everyone supporting its work for organizing this crucial hearing. This event is significant not only for the Commission's efforts, nor is it solely about our shared goal of holding all Russian war criminals accountable. Your work also serves as a vital signal to people worldwide. Today, the hearings take place in the same room where, after World War II, justice helped lay the foundations for a new and lasting protection of life and human rights. In courtroom 600, the site of the groundbreaking Nuremberg trials of Nazi officials, American Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson delivered his famous opening statement. And it's terrible news that even after so many years and lessons, humanity must revisit the Nuremberg principles to punish a new large-scale Russian evil following Hitler's footsteps. But on the bright side, it's good news that there are still those ready to return to these principles and administer justice. Our unity works for the good of our nations and all the people in the world. First, human rights fall, then wars arise. This is a fact, and it should become a universal truth that a real, honest, and reliable end to the war cannot happen without fully restoring justice for all those whose rights and lives have been shattered by the war. No war can be truly ended without bringing to justice those thugs responsible for sparking this war, killing and torturing, deporting children and adults, and who attempt to brutally extinguish the flames of freedom and resistance in occupied territories. There is no crime against humanity and life that Putin's Russia and those serving its insane dictator have not committed. The world has seen Ukrainian cities and villages burned to the ground by the Russian army. Everyone has at least heard about the mass killings that inevitably follow the Russian flag across occupied territories. It is impossible to reconcile with the pain of families torn apart by Putin's war and the deportation of Ukrainian children. We know the names of nearly 20,000 children who have been deported. And this is likely just a part of the larger number. Potentially hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian children could have been deported. Children whom Russia refuses to return to their families and homeland, children who are now being taught to hate liberty. And we must also not forget about millions of Ukrainians surviving under the Russian occupation, deprived of even the most basic human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, let there be no obstacles on the path to justice. Just as Nazism was condemned, Putin's state must face the same fate. He places himself alongside Hitler, justifying his actions in the Second World War. He's trying to plunge the entire free world into the same suffering he has brought to Ukraine and our people. Various nations have united to help stop Russia's aggression. And I thank every nation, every leader, and all political figures worldwide who are helping to protect Ukraine. You are truly on the right side of history. At the same time, I urge everyone who can hasten the arrival of a real peace, a peace that will free all Ukrainians from Russian domination across our entire land. A peace that, like after World War II, will be based on condemning the war criminals and their ideology. A peace that will ensure a happy and safe life for generations to come. We can bring such a peace together in unity and with all the support needed. And of course, I want to thank each and everyone in the United States who cherish freedom just as Ukrainians do, and Mr. President Biden and the administration and everybody in the US Congress who helps, and to all our partners worldwide. Thank you for your determination. When determination arises and justice prevails, the aggressor falls and evil gets punished. Action makes a difference. Slava Ukraini.
And the hero Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and that is about to be moving us on into the second part of this stream. But because there was a request earlier in the stream from Kyle Leeson, who threw in a super chat and helped the channel keep running, and also asked for a moment of silence for the Ukrainian soldiers that had passed in Avdiivka, we will be respecting that request. This is actually the first time that we have given a moment of silence at all during the history of this channel, and it's almost been 2 years of war, by the way. Just throwing that out there for y'all. On the 23rd of February, it's going to be the 2-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. So it's pretty wild. We haven't given a moment of silence yet, and we probably never will again until the war is actually over, because I don't like giving out moments of silence all the time, because it feels like we start turning moments of silence into like, you know, everyone's a winner award, and we give a moment of silence for everything. I want one moment of silence to make sure that we respect every single soldier that has died in a single unitary moment, like much like their cause, and the reason for their deaths was all for one unitary cause, which was defending the freedom and liberty of Ukraine and also the rest of the Western world. But for this one time, we will be doing a 30-second moment of silence. So we'll begin that now, and then in 30 seconds, we'll, of course, resume our usual stream. So And with that moment of silence out of the way, we are now going to be back to our usual programming and making sure that we get into all of the questions that have been sent in tonight, and also all of the questions that we've asked y'all that we have not gotten to in the course of running the show. I actually forgot to talk about these when the moment rose during the stream to be able to talk about them, so we want to make sure to address them right now. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we had a poll here that said, do you believe that Yulia Navalny, who is Alexei's widow, is making a brave decision or a senseless one by stepping up and taking his place? 80% said she is brave for stepping up, and only 12% said she is senseless for stepping up, while 7% said unsure. And on this one, in my opinion, I think she is brave for stepping up. I don't think it is senseless, because in reality, she has two options here. She can either step up and go down fighting, or she can leave Russia entirely and never return. And in my opinion, I would much rather go down fighting than run off. I won't say like a coward. I won't go that far. But I wouldn't run off. And that is a very big decision for her to make, and I think she's made the right one. It's also a very laudable decision as well. I will say that even though Navalny didn't have all the beliefs that we would share in the West, and, you know, he probably wouldn't have been very good for foreign policy in Russia, especially when it comes to Ukraine and Crimea, I think it would have been better than Putin. But that chance appears to be over now, so Yulia is stepping up and doing the best she can. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think it's a good move. I didn't like what Prigozhin's son did. Of course, you know, I'm not in their shoes, so I'm sure it's very easy for me to say that, especially when they're probably looking down the barrel of a gun if they go against what the Russian government wants. But what Prigozhin's son did ended up looking like he got pimped out. Putin killed his dad, and then his son immediately goes, you know what, I'm going to lead the Wagner unit now, and, you know, we're going to be great friends with the Russian government. You know, it's like, that doesn't look good. And it would not look that good if Navalny's wife ended up letting his cause die and, you know, not take the reins. I also think it's good, not just in that instance of, you know, trying to make sure there's some continuity and self-respect, but also for the fact that it will hopefully continue the destabilizing effect that Navalny had even beyond his death, hopefully. Although that might be a little bit tough or questionable, and I'm pretty sure that the Russian government will try and find something about her to put her in prison for. They're probably going to say that she absconded with some kind of funds or something like that, so that way they can throw her in prison. But beyond that, I think that it is certainly a worthy cause, even if it is a dangerous one, and even if it will lead possibly to death. But with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, an increasing amount of Ukrainians want Zelenskyy to serve only one term and not two. And what are your thoughts? 40% said, no, we want him to stay. 23% were unsure. 20% said that's a good idea. And 17% said, I'm indifferent. And on this one, I'll have to say, for me personally, I think it's a good idea if Zelenskyy does serve only one term, because he will have undergone such immense stress from this war that I think they're going to need fresh leadership after the war is over to carry them into the recovery. And I think Zelenskyy might be honestly worn out by then. And really, they do need to keep things switched up. They don't need to keep with just one leader. And I think that is a good idea for him to step aside after one term. And also, I think Zelenskyy even said that himself at the beginning of his term, that he was going to be a one-term president only. I believe that was also something he said as well, if I remember correctly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I think he should be, well, not needs to be, but he should be a one-term president. When he was initially in the election phase to be voted in as the president of Ukraine, he promised that he would be a one-term president. And I can see now that Wikipedia, and a lot of articles actually, back up the idea that sometime in late 2020 or in the middle of 2021, he then started to try and backtrack a little bit and say that he hadn't made up his mind. But to be entirely honest with y'all, if you promise something about being a one-term president during your first election cycle and you end up becoming the president, that is actually one promise that you literally can easily keep, because you can just easily not run for president again a second term. That's my opinion. If I was to try and become the president of the United States, and I told all of y'all, I'm going to be a one-term president, I'm going to go in for one term, and it's going to be over, and I'm going to leave, I would have to be a one-term president, because unlike other things that you might not be able to keep your promises on, because believe it or not, a lot of politicians don't lie just to lie. They'll promise something that they can achieve because there's another 434 representatives and another 100 senators that may have to agree with what they want to do. And that might make it impossible for them to actually achieve what they promised. But with something like this, it literally is as easy as just you deciding, I'm not running again. And that's something that I'd have to say. I think it would be important to remember that he did promise initially that he would only serve a single term, and I think promises like those are some of the most important to keep, because it doesn't rely on the rest of the government to follow through to make you a one-term president. It's just a you decision on whether you're going to run for president again or not. And I see a lot of people are saying, I think that's a decision for the Ukrainian people. I would say so, but the thing is that that's kind of still breaking the promise that you were going to be a one-term president. He didn't say, I'm going to be a one-term president only if everyone doesn't vote for me in the second election for a second term. He said, I'm going to be a one-term president. I'm going to be the president for 5 years, and then I'm going to not run again and just leave the position. So that's my honest opinion on that. I can't get this across. It's the principle of it. He promised that he'd only do one term. You can't back out of something like that. There was a president, actually, in U.S. history that promised to be a one-term president. There's only been one, and his name was James K. Polk. He told everyone in America, if you vote for me, I'm going to go to war with Mexico. If y'all will vote for me, I will only serve one term, and we will go to war with Mexico. So vote for me. And then everyone voted for him. And then we went to war with Mexico, we beat their ass, and then at the end of 4 years, he stepped down. And he did not run for a second term, and then he promptly died afterwards. I think it was like a year and a half after the end of his term, he died. And he was a one-term president, he kept to his word, and honestly, people had some pretty solid stuff to say about him. They're like, his only one campaign goal was vote for me, we're going to war with Mexico. He got voted in, we went to war with Mexico, we won, so he was a solid president. He kept up with his campaign policy. So, as far as that goes, it's a principle thing. If you promise to only serve one term, that isn't up for the Ukrainian people to decide. That's something that you already decided before you were elected. And some people are saying things have changed, but he was, according to Wikipedia and according to what other articles are even saying, which say that he started saying this even earlier, like May 20th of 2020, according to Bloomberg.com, he already made that promise before things had changed. Now, martial law is is another thing. Martial law means that, according to the Ukrainian constitution, he remains president until martial law is lifted and another election is held. But that doesn't have anything to do with running for a second term. We're talking about when a presidential election does run again, once martial law ends and this war ends, should he run for a second term? That's what I'm talking about. And in that regard, if you run for a second term, you go from, in my opinion, being a politician that is very admirable and who tried, to immediately you fall within the group of being another lying politician. Because this is literally the easiest promise to follow through on. You just don't have to run again. It's not like trying to get a policy or a law passed or anything else. This is literally something that you just decide personally not to do again. And that's something I think it starts to show, maybe you're not being entirely honest if you promise everyone, I'm just going to do one term. If you vote for me, it'll just be the 1 5-year term, and then that'll be it. And then once you get in, you go, I don't know, a second term would be pretty nice. It's like you lied, that's what it is. So I would have to be entirely honest with that. I feel like if you were to go against this, you would be lying. And you would turn into a lying politician. That's also why, I'll tell you all this up front, if I ever get to the ability or the chance to run for president, I'm not going to tell you I'm going to be a one-term president, because I will already be eyeballing a second term by the time I get into the first term, or by the time I even go into the first presidential election I can get into. I'll already.
You also got to think about the third term as well, because that's important also.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the fourth and the fifth and the sixth.
And then president for life. You got to think about these things, y'all. And that's why I'm not going to promise. I'm going to be honest to y'all. I'm going to become the emperor. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding about that. I do not want anyone to clip that in the future. But I will run for 2 terms. That will be my goal. Because in U.S. politics, 4 years, unless you're doing something very short term, like trying to get into a war and get out of one, and even nowadays, in the position that the United States is in, we don't really have short wars. They are very long ones for specific reasons. But beyond that, I will have to be a two-term president because a lot of the things I'd want to do would probably last maybe 10 to 12 years. And I would be able to be around for most of the time that stuff could be implemented. And then hopefully the next successor to the presidency would hopefully continue on those policies because they'd be wildly popular. But, you never know. But that's what I think. That's my opinion. Because I don't like people lying and making an easy statement like that and then backing out of it. That seems like lying to me. So once an election does come around, I'm thinking that he shouldn't be seen in it because he already promised the alternative, which is he wasn't going to run again. So with that, hope that does address that quite well. And let's see, Chase Cox said, didn't you promise you were going to finish law school? I don't think I ever promised that. I promised I was going to keep the stream running until the war ends. Even through law school, but I don't think I promised that law school was going to keep going until the end. If I did, then I'm wrong. But beyond that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll to address. So, with that, we are moving on to our Super Chat questions once again. And first up, we have a very generous $50 donation from Trevor Smith. Hey! And thank you very much, Trevor, for that support. He says, according to Wikipedia, and he says in parentheses, not reliable, I know. And thank you. He said Avdiivka cost Russia about 3% of the full troop population of their army.
And going off of that, let's see. I would say that that's probably fairly. Actually, I would say that that's less so than accurate because if we're going. Actually, no, that would be pretty accurate. I think going off of. Yeah, that would be pretty accurate off of the total number in the Russian armed forces. But going off of 3%, actually, what's interesting, I'm trying to find a way to word this, is that off of all the Russian soldiers that are in Ukraine, which we still believe is around 240,000 or so, that means that in the Battle of Avdiivka, 25% of all of the Russian soldiers that are in Ukraine at a single given moment died in Avdiivka, a quarter of them. And that's pretty damn high just for one battle, that lasted over 6 months, so it's kind of stretched out over time. But if you were to condense all of those casualties into a single day and then compare that to the amount of Russian soldiers that are in Ukraine in a single day, that's 25% of them, 1 in every 4. A very, very high number. But with that, I hope that does address that quite well, at least from what I know, and I think that number is correct. If we're going off of a statistic of the total Russian military population. But thank you so much for that massive support, Trevor Smith. You helped this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who helped to make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And we wouldn't be able to talk about the amazing feats of the Ukrainian armed forces, like shooting down multiple aircraft today. I mean, like, that's incredible stuff. And while Avdiivka wasn't necessarily a great moment in the war, the Ukrainians still fought one hell of a fight. And I don't think anyone can forget that kind of stuff, because it's not like the Russians, like, they're just getting steamrolled everywhere or taking wildly high casualties. They held that city for 6 months, 10 years if you include the Donbass conflict as well. And they inflicted 50,000 dead on the Russians for them to take a 2.5 square mile large city. I consider that to be a massive success on the Ukrainian armed forces side, and those casualties the Russians took taking the city is a testament to that. But with that, I hope that does address that very well. Thank you so much once again, Trevor Smith, for helping this channel to keep running, and also to carry on with someone who was in the chat who said, didn't you promise you were going to finish law school? They said, so you're a liar by your own words. No, because I said, if I said different, prove me wrong, and then I'll work off of that. So I don't know where you're coming from, buddy. But I have a feeling that you're not here to get honest answers. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Trister1, who's a longtime channel legend, and he throws in a super chat of $50. And a huge shout out to you, Trister, once again for that support. And he is, yes, indeed, a longtime channel legend. He says, a presidential election in a country under siege is a good question. Z isn't universally popular, but this is a weird world, not like 1940 or even 1991, and I'm not sure there are modern comparisons. And what say you?
And I thank you for the support, Trister1, and the massive support, by the way. And also, let's see, a presidential election in a country under siege is a good question. I would say so, and I don't think I don't think one should happen because it would violate the Ukrainian constitution to do so. And while in America we would run an election during wartime because we always have. It's a little different in Ukraine because the Constitution doesn't actually allow that. And so, let's see here. And so I would say it's a little tough to say. I honestly like. There's also a bit of a different cultural mindset here. As an American, I believe that elections are the way that the people exercise their democratic right. One of the most important ways that they do it is through voting for their representatives. So I always believe that elections should continue on because that's the only way that democracy truly does survive. But in Ukraine, that's not the way they view it. Their culture views it differently. Their constitution views it differently. So for that reason, you can't really apply that the same in Ukraine. So going off of that, I don't think they should have one, but an American mindset, I would say yes. I mean, we did have one in 1940. Well, we weren't really in World War II yet by 1941 when that election was held, but it was not that long after we were in World War II, just about a month or two later. And then in 1944, we had another presidential election, and believe it or not, FDR won again. No way. But still, beyond that, we did hold presidential elections during World War II. We did not hold a presidential election during World War I because World War I came and went before another presidential election could come around. We had multiple presidential elections during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We had elections during the U.S. Civil War. We had elections really during every single war that we've ever been involved in. Where we could have an election during the war, we still had one, whether it was on our soil, abroad, or wherever. Even in 1941, when you think about it, or 1940, which I believe is when that election was actually held, there still was a decent amount of influence and interference that could be had by foreign powers. World War II had already kicked off by that point, and I believe France had been defeated by the time the 1940 election came around. And going off of that, and considering what was going on around the world, and knowing that the United States was already kind of getting on the tracks to mobilizing and getting ready for a war, at least with Japan, because we kind of knew that that was on the horizon by 1940, it is kind of hard to say that they shouldn't have an election because, many of y'all may not know this, but there was an American Nazi Party, and it was pretty active. And I'll see if I can show y'all something of that, because, let's see here, the American Nazi Party, and let me go find ourselves a little picture here of one of their rallies, because it was actually kind of a big deal. Here we go. This is probably a fairly good representation of one. This is a, and also, by the way, there's going to be certain symbols popping up on screen, but this is for educational and context purposes. This is a American Nazi Party rally.
Oh.
Pretty decent turnout there that happened in Manhattan, I believe around like 1939. So you can actually see there was a fairly significant, at least, population of American Nazis that were in the United States in the middle of World War II, at the very beginning of it. And we still held an election in 1940. I have a feeling that nowadays there probably would be a serious argument that maybe an election would be suspended, although I don't think it should be anyways, because there was a significant presence of a clearly unfriendly power to the United States at that time in America. But still, nevertheless, it is something to remember that we were still holding elections even with political environments kind of like that. So that's, kind of the difference in opinion in between America and Ukraine. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, they shouldn't have one during wartime. But as soon as the war ends, they should have an election. I think they certainly should, no doubt about it. But I bet many of y'all didn't know that. And I bet many of y'all also didn't know that the American Nazis and the Mafia actually ended up getting into a brawl not that long after that rally happened. And they ended up breaking pool cues over each other's heads and stuff in some hotel. It was actually kind of wild. And apparently,
wait, the mob shook down the Nazis.
Yeah, the mob shook down the Nazis. The Nazis ended up getting in a brawl with them. And then the Jewish members of the Mafia came in with knuckle dusters, started breaking jaws. I mean, it was like a whole wild like throwdown in this hotel in New York City. Like, I would highly recommend.
Never heard about this.
Yeah, I mean, dude, history is actually really fun when you get into like the niche side of things like that. But not that long after World War II started, and that embarrassed, because believe it or not, the American Nazis ended up losing the brawl in the hotel against the mafia, and it ended up damaging their reputation so badly that they kind of say, instead of the start of the war killing off the Nazi party in America, it was actually the brawl in the hotel that did more damage to the image of Nazis in America. So
man, that's like the only thing the mob's ever done that's maybe a positive thing is they did beat the hell out of some Nazis when they came over here.
Dude, and you know what's even crazier is that the mafia ended up going back to Italy in world, like, just to do some rabbit holes here and tell y'all some interesting stuff. There was a very heavy Italian-American presence in New York City, as many of y'all would know, and Boston too, and some other cities like Chicago, where a lot of immigrants would travel to once they made it to America. And what's really interesting is that in World War II, they would get drafted into the army, and of course, most of the guys in the army went to Europe. And so then they were like, you know what? We got a lot of Italians that still speak Italian in the ranks of the army. Let's gather them up and send them into Sicily. And then what was ironic about that is that a lot of them weren't just, army soldiers. A lot of them were connected to the mob. So then they went back to Italy, and they ended up researching the mob in Italy because they ended up connecting with the mafias that existed in Sicily and everything. And that's how the international mafia crime syndicate kind of started. And that's why you always see that in the mob movies that were made in like the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, they were always talking about, hey, the heat's getting pretty bad, Tony. Why don't you go back to Italy? Like, they wouldn't have been able to do that before World War II because Mussolini actually had a specific chief of police that got put in charge in Italy that's whole job was to get rid of the mafia. And you know how he did it? He just deported everyone to America. But
you do know that the Italian mobs in America were like a very, very different most of the time than the mobs in Italy because they had like a much more vicious version of the mob in Italy called the Black Hand that was like the origination of the American mobs, but it was like the American mobs were a little bit more tame because the stuff the Black Hand would do in Italy was insane.
And let me see here. I thought the Black Hand was a was a method of Italian immigrant gangsters in Camorra and the Mafia. Yeah. But, I mean, they still kind of brought it over, and then they went back, and then they kind of connected all the pieces. But nevertheless, that's why, I didn't actually know that much about the Black Hand. I just know about the police chief guy that ended up being like, you know what? You look like a mob member. You're deported to America. And then they just deport him to America. It's like, one thing that everyone says in Italy is that Mussolini was a bad guy. But he did get rid of the mafia. But the only reason he got rid of the mafia is because the police chief just deported all of them to America. And we ended up with the mafia guys who were in Italy here in America. And then they went back after World War II and they started up the mafia over there again. But it never, like the Italian mafia after World War II, and especially after Mussolini and the police chief got done with them, it never was as vicious as the one that was in America. It was a little bit of like a weaker, more watered down version, but they still had connections there. So that's something always interesting to note. And also another thing that y'all might not know, like I don't mean to go on a massive like history rabbit hole about Italy and how America and Italy have a lot to do with each other, but when those Italian Americans went back to Italy in World War II, y'all wouldn't believe it, but they were actually the ones who brought back what we consider modern, real Italian food. They brought it back to Italy because, in case y'all don't know, and this is why, like, this blows me away, pizza was not an Italian food. It was a specific food, I think, to Genoa. And Genoa, the city, was the only city in the entire nation of Italy that made pizza. When Italian-American immigrants arrived here in America, the Genoese would bring the idea of pizza with them. And because there was a much more abundant resource of the ingredients to make pizza, they made the pizzas in America a lot more luxurious and exorbitant than the pizzas that came from Italy. A lot more cheese, a lot more tomato sauce, the things that you would consider in America to make a pizza, they originated from America, from much cheaper ingredients. So when World War II came around, those Italian Americans, which had all kind of meshed together, regardless of what city they were from, they stopped looking at themselves as being a Genoese or a Tuscan, and they just started looking at themselves as Italians. They all kind of melded together the foods, the different foods from all over Italy that were only in specific niche areas, and when they went back in World War II, they brought the American concept of pizza and other kinds of Italian foods, not to name them all off, with them. And that's why now you can find a pizza anywhere in Italy. Because before World War II, you were only going to find a pizza in one specific city. No other city would make a pizza. But now it's made all over Italy. And what's ironic about that is that the Italians will sit there now and go, oh, American pizzas, they're crap. But it's like, we're the only reason Italy has pizzas across the whole country. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a thing as a pizza in most parts of Italy. But anyways, just wanting to share with y'all a whole bunch of interesting history about all of Italy and American relations, because it's actually pretty deep and especially really in depth once you get into like the 20th and late 19th centuries. But anyways, with that, we got to get on to the next one. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well, and thank you, Trista1, for allowing me to go through a very interesting rabbit hole about election interference, possible bad parties, and not only that, a lot of Italian-American history. But still, thank you so much once again, Trista, for being an old guard and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Snow White, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Snow White, for that support indeed. Snow White is indeed a longtime channel legend as well. And they said, live, laugh, cry.
Oh, Snow White put it out there for real, for real. But still, thank you so much for the support, Snow White, and helping this channel to keep running. It is folks like you, Snow White, who help to make this channel possible and live, laugh, and cry. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well. And thank you for being an old guard, Snow White of the channel. And thank you for letting us live, laugh, and cry. Because if we're not crying hard enough, we're not virtue signaling hard enough. You know what I mean? But with that, thank you so much once again. And we're on.
Man.
Oh, man. So, typical playbook. I start a fight with them. They respond, and then I say, I live in their head rent-free. It's like, what a stupid take. But anyways, with that,
we're going to start charging rent. No more rent-free. We're charging rent now. You can't stay here for free no more. That's over.
Next time our name gets mentioned anywhere on that YouTube channel, we need them to start paying royalties for the mention, because it is getting ludicrous how many times we're mentioned a week on either their Twitter or their YouTube channel. And then we just simply, like, people here on this channel let us know, hey, the guy's talking crap. And then we were like, dude, can you just drop it and let it go? And then the idiot goes, aw, man, rent free. It's like, no, we're living in your head rent free. We just want you to stop. Like, we honestly don't care. It's like, we're
starting the eviction process now.
Yeah,
it starts now.
Yeah, we're starting the eviction process today. But anyways, and by the way, hate to hear about the cops apparently arresting him in the hallway. Apparently he had a little bit of a fent trip. But anyway, it was his long lost prior self. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you once again for the support, Snow White, and helping this channel to keep on running.
And the next one goes to Barry Woodward, who's also a longtime channel legend. He also throws in a $20 donation and says, catapult the real Constitution into the effing future by any means necessary. Slava LSA.
And Slava the Elite Big Army. And thank you so much for the support, Barry Woodward. And by the way, y'all, we've got a new flag design. I'm not going to show it to y'all tonight. I'm going to hold this one back because we're still going to modify it. But it actually came in from a viewer. And this one is actually better than the original flag design. I'm liking it a lot. And I think we could tweak it just a little bit. And we're going to have ourselves an actual Lee Spring Army flag. So y'all make sure to keep an eye out. Sleep with one eye open, because it could drop at any moment. Actually, it's going to drop on LSA Day. And I'm going to let y'all know in advance when that is. It isn't going to be the second anniversary of the war in Ukraine. LSA Day is like, I think 27 or 28 days after the anniversary of the war, because the Lee Spring Army was founded like 27 or 28 days after the war started. But beyond that, I do have to thank you so much, Barry Woodward, for wanting to catapult the real Constitution into the freaking future. And we're going to be catapulting all kinds of constitutions in the future. I'm telling you what. You like trains? I know Epic Trains Canada likes trains. But you like trains, you get trains. You like nice interstates, you get nice interstates. You like a nice job, a well-paying job, you get a well-paying job. It's America. But anyways, you want a nice, affordable house that doesn't cost $1.4 million? You're gonna get a nice, affordable house, less than $1.4 million. there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things, Barry Woodward, that I'd want to do as president of the United States. And I can't wait for the time to really tell y'all about what we're going to do. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I'm not sure what kind of sanctions the United States is planning on putting on Russia as a result of Navalny's killing. But it looks like the American government is warning American citizens to get out of Russia immediately because the sanctions that are about to be put on them are so bad that Putin is likely to start lashing out at the Americans left inside of Russia. So I don't know what's coming next because I thought we pretty much put all the sanctions possible on them at this point, but apparently we had something left and it must be big. So maybe it'll turn out and pan out to be something actually effective this time and not just a little pansy like type of sanction this time. Hopefully not. But anyways, moving on to our next one. We have a $10 super chat from AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who says, I heard unconfirmed reports in the early hours of the war that Russia had established air supremacy, and it is now 17,438 hours later, and the Russian Air Force can kiss their ass goodbye.
Dang, that ended hardcore, man. I was like, goodness. But AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, 17,438 hours later, the Russians are still just saying it's a few hours away, they'll have air superiority. It's never going to happen because they don't have anti-radiation missiles. They don't have them, dang it. And also, really quickly to clarify that, because some people are like, what do you mean anti-radiation missile? What the hell are you talking about? There is a specific kind of a missile called an anti-radiation missile. Let me show it to y'all right here. Here we go. An anti-radiation missile is a missile designed to detect and home in on any enemy radio emission source. Typically, these are designed for use against enemy radar, although jammers and even radios used for communications can also be targeted in this manner. The earliest known anti-radiation weapon is a variant of the Blum & Voss BV-246 radar-guided bomb, which was made by the Germans in World War II, funnily enough. But beyond that, what's important about these kinds of missiles is that they allow your armed force to effectively mess with air defense. And air defense is truly the most dangerous thing, I think, really in any war. I think it's more dangerous than actual enemy aircraft, because enemy aircraft, sure, they can deal with you, but it's really hard for an aircraft to engage and destroy air defense on the ground. It's next to impossible unless they're specifically outfitted with anti-radiation missiles like these, like this AGM-88 HARM on an F-18 Super Hornet, or an F-18C Super Hornet. But beyond that, it's very hard for them to deal with them. And that's why the Russians are never going to be able to gain air supremacy, because as long as the Ukrainians have some kind of an air defense system, mostly radar guided, and the Russians lack a severe ability to attack and destroy those anti-air sites without incurring heavy losses or really not even being able to successfully engage them at all, the Ukrainians are always going to be able to keep some kind of air supremacy. And so that's my honest take. I don't think they're ever going to be able to get air supremacy just because of the air defense on the ground and their complete lack of any large numbers of anti-radiation missiles. But with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And thank you so much once again for support, AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, because you are speedy, you do bang bang, and also you are helping this channel to keep running. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Gilly Flower, who's also a longtime channel legend, who does not leave a comment, but throws in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Gilly Flower, for that support and helping to keep us running. We also have a 10 from Georgy Milishev, who says, March 15th, election is coming. He said, Putin will win, no denying it. It'll go easy, it'll go smooth, it'll go perfect. It'll go perfect. Pre-manicured Russians will scratch their head, and their back Russians will wonder how to react.
And I would have to say, the Russians, yes, I would have to say, the pre-manicured Russians, ones with the nice lawns, they'll probably be wondering, what the hell happened? But we'll all know what happened. Putin won again. But nevertheless, I will have to concur with you, absolutely, Georgy Milishev, that it would be an easy win for Putin. Because, you see, when you rig the elections, and you count the votes, and you also cast the votes, it's very easy to make sure that you're always the unanimous winner of every single election. As a matter of fact, let's go back and look at the last Russian election. The presidential election, that is. The 2018 Russian presidential election. Oh, why, my goodness. Well, it looks like he won by a whopping 77.5%. Well, I'm sure that those numbers are very accurate. And look, 67% of the country turned out to vote. Wow. Absolutely incredible, I have to say. And look, Matthew, the communists came in second with 11.9% of the vote. He was really close to winning, after all. And then this guy came in with 5.7%. Oh, my goodness. Well,
Oh, Lord forbid the communists get in charge of Russia. We're going to be screwed.
I mean, goodness gracious. Think about that, Matthew. What if he really did get in charge of the country? I mean, he was very close. He's
That was almost a disaster. It was so close to being a disaster.
I mean, this guy really does look like a successor to Stalin right there. He looks like he's going to be putting people in camps. But beyond that, wouldn't it be terrible if a communist won? Yes,
Man, it was
quite
only
terrible.
a communist one. I'm glad the independent won, you know. Who's the independent?
Well, this
Oh,
guy-
yes, this fella right here, the independent. He
Yes.
looks real independent.
Yes, you see, he rises above the petty squabbles of the common Russian man, talking about, let's see here, whatever the hell, LDPR, Liberal Democratic Party, and
Oh.
the communists. Okay, he rises above it all. He's an independent. He looks out for the Russian people themselves. But I have to be quite honest with you, Matthew. I mean, you couldn't really believe this if you ever saw this in most countries, because I'm pretty sure that the election before this probably had some pretty telling numbers as well. And let's see here. Let's see, nominated as in 2012. Let's go look at the 2012 election. So Putin actually won the 2012 election with 64%. The Communist Party was actually a little bit more popular, according to the rigged election back in 2012. But let's go back and look at the election before that, if we
Wait.
can.
That's Mikhail Prokhorov right there. I think he got knocked off a short while back, wasn't he?
Yes, I remember. Yes, he got
Well,
killed.
they're mighty unfortunate. It just happens to line up with being a candidate. Oh dear, there he is, right there campaigning. That's also one of his last days, actually.
So let's see, Matthew. The 2006 Russian presidential election. Russian
Oh
presidential.
dear, and that guy was an independent too. What a shame.
Let's go back and look at this. Oh, look.
Oh, Medvedev, look at that.
Because you see, this was when Putin had to switch out, so that way they didn't pass the 2-term limit, because it's just 2 consecutive terms, it's not 2 terms for life. But look at Medvedev, won by 71% again. Now let's go back to the 2000 Russian presidential election, and this is
Whoa,
probably
looking extra ghoulish there, looking like the real one.
Man, his ass looking like Smeagol. Oh my god.
Looking like he's got a goblin. Never mind.
Hang on, hold up. I gotta go get the picture.
Oh,
He really
is
does,
that what
doesn't he?
Smeagol is?
Yeah, that's what Smeagol is. It's some from Lord of the Rings or whatever. But beyond that, yikes. Oh, goodness. He looked really goblin-like back then. But look, this is probably like one of the elections that he had that was the least rigged. All of them were rigged, but this is the one that he had the least rigged, and it was 53% back then. And they're now saying that after that, him and his crony have been able to get over 70% most times in every single election since then. Like, that's a stretch. Like, to be that popular that much for that long, I mean, no one else is. I mean, like, if you think about some of the most successful people in Western governments that served for exorbitantly long times, FDR was pretty popular for his time, but it actually turned out that there was a decent amount of election corruption going on in his last 2 terms in 1940 and 1944. I'm not getting into that, but there was proven to be a decent amount of corruption there, and that may have been why he was continuing to win those 2 elections. Although, some things show that maybe another person would have won, but there wasn't really any good options either anyway, so there's an argument against that. But another example would be, and also, by the way, for all my British viewers, I'm not saying this in a political light, I'm just saying this because they were a long-lasting prime minister, but Margaret Thatcher was probably one of the longest-serving prime ministers in modern British history, and even they ended up running out their welcome and being voted out for someone else. well, British parliamentary politics works different. You really don't vote for the prime minister. You really vote for your member of parliament, and then the members of parliament of each party get together, and then they kind of figure out who they're going to have as their prime minister. So it's a little bit different. But beyond that, even Margaret Thatcher, who ended up serving for a really long time, ended up pissing off the public and getting replaced. You cannot serve this long in a real democracy and be loved by 70-something% of the voters. Like, that is ludicrously insane. And you never see that in any instance where there isn't some kind of election meddling to some serious degree. Like, hell, even in America, it's very rare to see landslide elections. I think, as a matter of fact, I know a lot of people are about to bring up certain presidential candidates over the past 40 years and say, oh, those are landslide. Not really. I think the last presidential candidate that really had a landslide was actually Nixon. And let me go check. Let's see, what election was that, man? The 1972 presidential election?
I can't remember that far back. You got me on that one.
Let me go check this, because I think it was the 1972 United States presidential. Yeah, it was Nixon. So I'll show you this. This was actually mental. He ended up winning almost every single electoral vote in 1972. Almost every single one. Like, every single state voted for Nixon. And of course, he ended up resigning not that long afterwards, because this was the infamous election where the Watergate scandal came out, and then he ended up, resigning from the office, and Gerald R. Ford became the president. But he also got 60% of the vote. I mean, wildly enough. He was actually a pretty popular president before the whole Watergate thing happened, and then his reputation was tarnished for the rest of all time. But yeah, that was the last real landslide election that you ever saw in the United States. Beyond that, people will call certain elections landslides, but they come nowhere close to the 1972 presidential election with Nixon in it. Like, that was a real landslide as far as the popular vote went, even as far as the electoral college went. It was a landslide in every degree. So going off of that, have to say, it is freaking wild. Like, it is unbelievably insane to get a landslide for that many terms over 20-something years. And he's going to get another one. I bet come March 15th, he will get another one, and everyone's going to be like, well, I saw it coming. He's going to get landslides until he's dead. That's the truth. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, really quickly, I just want to make this very clear. I'm not talking because, I know some people are going to be thinking that I'm breaking the no politics rule. I'm not, because I'm not picking a side. I'm just picking certain candidates that ended up having landslides and stuff in recent Western political history to try and show you the precedent that nobody is that popular for that long. Nobody is. And it's really hard to see anything like that anywhere in a real democracy. It's impossible. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Craig Alex, who throws in a 7, along with June Bug, who throws in a 5. Also, LSA Sergeant Figment threw in another 5 as well, along with Robert Johnson, and then a 3 from Nick, who is still thinking, LSA. And we have a 2 from June Bug once again. And none of those came in with comments, but thank you to all 7 of you for that support and helping to keep this channel running. And we also have a $10 super chat from Viktor Fedorov, who says, whatever happened to Drasimov?
And I would say, I don't know. We still haven't seen him. And I would have to be honest with you. I think he might actually be dead. If he makes a public appearance, color be shocked. But I'm not thinking that he's alive anymore, because he's gone pretty much into oblivion and has not been seen. I mean, we haven't seen him in a single place, hair nor hide of him. But with that, I got to thank you for the support, and I also got to thank everyone else for the support. That was all called off in one giant fell swoop. From what I can see, none of y'all threw in comments, but I do have to thank each and every one of y'all for the support and helping this channel to keep on. Actually, I think I do see a comment here and there from LSA Sergeant Figman, who threw in a 5 and said, just to clarify, we haven't lost hope. We just don't think the Navalny family can do much anymore. All the more reason to support Ukraine. And I would certainly agree with that, LSA Sergeant Figman. I think that there is no doubt about it, a massive reason to continue to support Ukraine, because right now, the greatest destabilizing factor probably inside of Russia domestically is the war in Ukraine, weirdly enough, which is a foreign affair for Russia. But with that, I thank you for throwing that in, and also thank you for supporting the channel and helping us to keep it running. And also, Robert Johnson said, LSA, and hey, LSA, and you gotta love the Lee Spring Army. The best army, there ever is. And with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Butchie777, who says, for the private island fund where the LSA can live in peace and happiness, and the Kool-Aid is pure juice, and no socialites allowed. And I hope we don't get annexed and take a live chat. Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much, Butchie777, for the private island fund. We will look into getting a private island. You know, something that I was actually thinking would be really cool. Like, hear me out. This is something that I thought would be really neat. Not a private island, but what if the Lee Spring Army turned into a non-profit organization? Like, Lee Spring Army was kind of separate from the channel, but it was still managed by me and Matthew. But it was a non-profit that people could donate to, and it ended up helping out in countries that were sanctioned by the LSA. So, like, say the United States and Britain on, like, humanitarian things. I think that'd be really cool, you know, help out with, like, tornado relief here in America, hurricane relief, earthquakes, you know, things like that. I think that'd be really cool to have a actual group that did that our way, you know, and so that way, you know, people would hopefully trust it a little better and like it. And in other countries too, like the UK, you know, you could do stuff over there, or in Germany, or in Canada, or Australia. You know, the Lee Spring Army could become a real global force of good in a humanitarian way. I don't really know, because I know some people are gonna be like, what if we made a private army? No. No. You start getting into some really murky waters there when trying to create a private army out of something. And honestly, that's not really the way I would want to take the Lee Spring Army, because that would be pretty wild to become a warlord off of YouTube. So I would like to just do like a humanitarian thing with it, because I think that would be great. And I think that it would certainly help out a lot. Probably wouldn't end up helping out much in Ukraine, but it certainly would help out the Western world. That's no doubt about it. But with that, I see Nathan say it's called the Red Cross. Yeah, but the Red Cross isn't Red Crossing anymore. They don't even take letters from prisoners of war anymore and bring them to their families, or exchange their letters with their families. They don't even do that kind of crap anymore. The Red Cross is soft. And also, other groups, like, I don't mean to diss on groups that we have fundraised for in the past, but considering that this is long since past, like the last time we ran a fundraiser for these people was nearly like 10 months ago. Doctors Without Borders, while being an amazing organization that does help out plenty of people also in Ukraine, ended up taking a very clear stance against the genocide of Israelis on October 7th, and made it sound like the Palestinians and Hamas was somehow the victim of their own massacre that they made inside of Israel on October 7th, and acted like they were the victims. I didn't like that. That's why we never fundraised for them again. And also I didn't like some of the other things that they did as well. And that's why I would want to make, you know, it's like a wild offshoot idea of this channel got like 1 million or 2 million or 3 million subscribers, a nonprofit of our own that could do our own things, because then we could actually support the right causes instead of trying to, you know, go with this, with whatever this goofy moralism that some of these groups are going for, and also being weak-spined. The Lee Spring Army could actually be a strong-backed group that could actually do things and help folks out. That's why I would like to do something like that. And also, Georgie, we did read your super chat, and we thanked you for it. And let's see, and I'm reading through, let's see, Red Cross sucks now. Yeah, the Red Cross does suck. I hate to say that, because, you know, they did great stuff in the past. I mean, the Red Cross was like the first humanitarian organization in the world. And nowadays they've kind of fallen to like that corporatism that a lot of groups do that doesn't allow them to really do anything anymore. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support, Butchie777. That's what I'd really like to do in the future. But, you know, it will take a much larger channel to be able to make something like that possible. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to the Libertine, who puts in the 5 and says, I live about 30 kilometers from Benidorm, Spain, where the Russian defector was killed, and there are many Russians here on the Costa Blanca. Scary times. And you know, that's something that the Russians have done quite a bit, is they've built up a pretty large international presence of operatives around the world. I remember when we went to the UK, we were literally driving through Salisbury, and there was a killing of a former Russian spy right there in the park as we were driving by it. And he had some kind of nerve agent smeared on his face by an operative. It's crazy how widespread and international the Russians do have a spy network that are willing to carry out killings wherever they basically are. And that's just wild. They even did it in Spain just a few days ago. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it is crazy. It's scary times for sure, and you know, even sometimes we get concerned about it. But my thing is I'm not really that concerned about it because we got enough rifles. You know, if anything happened, you know, I'm pretty sure we'd be able to hold our own for a good bit, and also we make sure to tend to certain kinds of safety and security concerns the best we can. Of course, you know, nothing's foolproof, but you know, we still do everything we can. But beyond that, it is scary times for sure, but I have a feeling that we'll probably be able to power through them all together as a united Western world. Ooh yeah! But still, thank you so much once again, The Libertine, and also, really cool to hear that you're one of our Spanish viewers, a very rare group of Lee Spring Army soldiers. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2, and says, Sarge is back, and sad about Alexei, and viva la resistance.
And vive la resistance! And thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you once again for throwing in some support. But it is sad to hear about Alexei Navalny, but I'm pretty sure that the resistance will live on. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to the Bearded Atheist, who puts in a 2 and says Russia will claim he killed his brother during the visit.
And let's see here. And where is that one? Damn, I lost my track. I was trying to look through the super chats and find it. Can you reread that one again?
It says Russia will claim he killed his brother during the visit.
Oh, that's it. I finally found it. Thank you for the support, the Bearded Atheist. And I would certainly agree with that. I would say that Russia will claim that he did kill his brother during the visit. Probably no doubt, because they come up with stupid stuff like that, and they would be the ones to push it if anyone. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you, the Bearded Atheist, who help to make this channel possible. And I thank you so much for keeping the fuel of the Lee Spring Army burning. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that, we're moving into our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. And we had the entire roster tonight. We had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, Toxic Bananas, Tightlines LSO, and David Millsaps. They said tonight's Morse code cipher is the Russia's Air Force is losing a battle against, believe it or not, a country with hardly an Air Force.
And ding, 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 ding. That's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I gotta say, that is something that is kind of funny. The Russians are losing their navy to a country without a navy, and they're losing their air force to a country that hardly has an air force compared to the Russians. But time and time again, the Russians prove it's not the size that matters. It's the punch that matters. You know what I mean? But with that, thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message on the 727th day of the war. Really impressive stuff. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one, the live chat, goes to Mad Machine, who says, have you heard of the Black Hornet drone and how they've been used so far in Ukraine?
I have heard of the Black Hornet drone. We don't really hear a lot about how it's being used. In fact, we've really seen no footage of Black Hornet drones being used inside of Ukraine. So we have kind of like a black hole of information there that we really can't answer too well because there's just not a lot known about its actual usage inside of Ukraine. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion, at least from the knowledge I know. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Junebug, who says, what happened to Mr. Lunchtime?
And I would say, what happened to Mr. Lunchtime? He checked out. But with that, I don't know. Mr. Lunchtime was seen once and never seen again. I'm assuming he's probably dead at this point. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And we have a question from O-Tubes. He says, I read recently that Australia has only enough ammo, etc. for a week in a major conflict. And what are your thoughts on that?
It is probably true, but ammo is expendable. And Australia is probably counting on their war industry to kick in if a war was to start. Or they are counting on other countries like the United States to be able to pump out enough ammo that the Australians can just buy some off of us and then fight their war that way. a lot of countries do that in the world. A lot of people don't know that, actually. It's not that they don't get it, it's just that they don't know it. They don't know how the world works. But a lot of countries actually end up buying ammo and equipment from others because usually they don't have the industrial ability to produce the stuff. Back in the day, back during the Victorian era, it was usually the Prussians, through companies like Krupp, that ended up supplying a lot of the major nations in Europe at the time with their weapons. And then later on, it ended up becoming the United States. And you can actually see that through the ebb and flow, especially if you're in the gun collector's world, of ammunition quality and military surplus ammunition. And it's really cool because if you find any ammunition that was made from the times of 1952 to 1954, it is dog water garbage. And like everyone avoids the stuff and hates it because the ammo that was made from 1952 to 1954 was made with low quality control because the United States just needed ammo to fight in the Korean War, and they also needed a decent amount of ammo to supply other nations with, although the ammunition was not really standardized by that point. They still made a decent bit for other countries, but beyond that, the ammo is garbage. So if you ever find ammo from 1952 to 1954 in real life and you're trying to shoot it, you just avoid it because it just is terrible stuff. But it kind of shows, you know, when push comes to shove, some countries like America, that's a good example, will just forego the quality control side of things a little bit to make sure that there's just volume. So it is concerning to hear that it is just a mere week from what they're saying that they'd be able to hold out, but I'm sure that they have some kind of a workaround for that where they would be able to get enough ammo to keep the war going. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And I see a demand for a legendary kind of a thing in the chat, and we will get to it after this last super chat of the night. And so we are on to the final super chat of the night. And so who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And the lucky last viewer of the night is the LSA as a whole, because the question I've received the most is, where is that marmot? And we have to have that there. Marmot. Hello there.
Oh, hello there.
Hello.
Oh, hello,
Governor. Why did you squish my tail?
Rent free. Who the hell are you?
I'm going to start an eviction today, Governor. Go ahead and get yourself out of the apartment, okay?
I watched someone get pepper blood in the hallway.
What the hell is wrong with you guys? But anyways, dude, it is marmot time, baby! And we love the marmot. I love the marmot so much. It has so much soul behind those eyes and that tail. I don't know what the hell's wrong with that tail. But beyond that, it is a marmot.
My tail's very plump, Governor. Look at my tail. It's so plump.
Okay, so I'm gonna cue you all into something because I was telling Matthew about this before the stream. It's probably going to be happening. It's probably actually on course, but we'll have to check. We are actually probably going to, on LSA Day, we are actually going to be opening a new merch store. Many of y'all may notice that links to the merch store don't work anymore because the merch store doesn't exist anymore due to reasons. We're really kind of like trying to restructure it and make it better and also get cooler things. And I'm not going to promise this, but this is in the future. There will be a plushie Lee Spring Army Marmot that you might be able to get on the merch store once it opens. So keep your eyes peeled, because this thing might actually be something that you can get and keep at your house. A real plushie Marmot. Can't promise it, though, because I got to see how difficult that will really be to get done. But I'm hoping that we can get it done because the new merch store is going to have a lot of cool stuff on it. We're not just going to have like t-shirts and hoodies and stuff. They're going to be top of the line t-shirts, top of the line hoodies, top of the line mugs. We're going to make everything top of the line. We're going to have plushies, keychains, flags, all kinds of crazy stuff. But it really required us to restructure the entire merch store and how it operated to make those things possible. And we still have to look into how difficult or how possible those things really are going to be. And also patches. Tired of Tyrant said, need a patch too. We are going to make patches. We're going to make patches. We're going to make everything. I'm probably even, like, if it becomes really successful and the merch store has a life of its own, which the prior merch store really didn't have beyond, like, its first initial months. Beyond that, it didn't really do much. We are also going to be trying to make other things. We may actually commission, like, paintings, wallpapers, stuff like that that you can buy on the merch store. So that would be really cool. But we'll be looking into all of that and trying to figure that out here in the future. And Falkor said, "Will you have gold shoes?" No. No, we will not have gold
We're gonna
shoes.
get those Nike Air Force Ones, and we're gonna spray paint them gold and put the letter M for Matt on the side.
We're gonna put the E for enforcer, but with that, we're gonna put EM for electromagnetic. But anyways, with that, that is the end of the stream tonight. I gotta thank every single one of y'all so much for watching. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to run the stream for all of y'all tonight. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to hit that like button, make sure to comment, and make sure to subscribe, because it makes us really happy, and it helps us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. Thank you all for another great stream tonight, and we'll see you all tomorrow. And be sure to watch that short war summary as well. And, of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, and good night. And hello there.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.